are recording.
Wonderful. Good morning, everyone. Today is Tuesday, October 26th, 2021. I'm Teresa Mosqueda, Chair of the Select Budget Committee. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Lewis.
Present.
Morales.
Here.
Peterson.
Here.
Pursuant.
Present.
Strauss.
Present.
Gonzalez.
Present.
Herbold. Juarez.
Here.
Chair Mosqueda.
Present.
8 present.
Thank you very much. If we are joined by another colleague, which I assume we will be, I will make sure to announce them. Good morning, colleagues. Thank you so much for joining the Select Budget Committee meeting. This is day 1 of 3, our opportunity as a council to go through the various amendments that council members have submitted. This is amendments to the mayor's proposed budget. This is the beginning of the council's opportunity to shape our budget so that we can have a proposed budget for the community to review in early November. Today, we're going to have an opportunity to hear 4 different sections. You'll see those outlined in the agenda in front of us. We have categorized all of the presentations for the various departments today into first, administration, which includes finance general, finance administrative services, the ledge department, mayor's office, and city auditor. Next, we'll have the utilities presentation. This includes information technology department, public utilities, and city light. We'll then have arts, education, and culture. This includes public libraries, Department of Education and Early Learning, Office of Arts and Culture, Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs, and finally, we will conclude with the 4th title, Planning, Community, and Workforce Development. This includes Department of Construction and Inspections, Planning, Community Development, Office of Neighborhoods, Office of Sustainability and the Environment, Office of Economic Development, and finally, Office of Labor Standards. Colleagues, I'd like to move to adopt the agenda, so I may make a quick amendment to this to include the walk-on amendments for today. I move to adopt the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Peterson. It's been moved and second to adopt the agenda. Now, colleagues, I do appreciate that many of you have been working around the clock with central staff on the amendments that you submitted on time. We do know that there are a few additional walk-on amendments. I know, for example, on one of these, there was additional information that was provided to council members from the departments after our deadline of Monday noon last week. So we are able to consider walk-on amendments that did not meet our internal deadline and do not have 2 co-sponsors by amending the agenda today. We obviously greatly appreciate all of the work that you all have done to try to submit amendments early, but this is an opportunity for us, if there are late-breaking amendments, to consider those. To make sure that we have these amendments in front of us, I move the agenda to add the following 3 walk-on amendments. This includes arts/walk-on/1. The next one is IDT/walk-on/1. And the final one is RET/walk-on/1. And place these agenda items on the place these items on the agenda as the last item under the associated section. Again, thank you very much, Councilmember Peterson. It's been moved and seconded. Again, these will be considered after each of the previously submitted amendments that had been worked on with central staff, but we will get to them before moving on to the following categories. And Ally and central staff will help make sure that we know exactly where those items are coming up when we get to those sections for arts, information and technology, and RET. Thank you for the move and the second there. Are there any additional comments? Hearing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Lewis.
Yes.
Morales.
Yes.
Peterson.
Yes.
Pursuant.
Yes.
Strauss.
Yes.
Gonzalez.
Yes.
Herbold. Juarez.
Aye.
Chair Mosqueda.
Aye.
8 in favor, none opposed.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Thank you, colleagues. The agenda is now in front of us, and the first item on the agenda is public hearing. We have committed to having 30 minutes of public hearing every committee meeting, and because of a late start on my behalf, I'm going to allow for our public comment to go to 10:07. and then we will start with our regularly scheduled meetings. We do have a lot of people sign up for public comment, and as I have noted in every meeting, we will have public comment at the beginning of every meeting. We also have a public hearing the night of November 10th that is just dedicated to hearing every single person who dials in. So today we will have public comment for the next 30 minutes, and then if we're not able to hear from you, I apologize in advance. That means if your number is higher than 25 or 30, it's probable that you will not have the chance to speak this morning, but you are welcome to send your comments to council@seattle.gov. That's council@seattle.gov. And you also have the chance to provide public comment tomorrow morning. Again, we will have public comment that starts at 9:30 a.m. Public comment period is now open. I will read the names in the order in which they appear on the list here today. I'll call 2 names at a time. You'll be teed up to provide your public comment. You'll hear on your end, you have been unmuted. Folks on the line, that's your indication you need to hit *6 to unmute your own line. Again, you need to hit *6 to unmute your own line once you hear that prompt. Once you finish speaking, please do hang up and dial back in on the listen in line or watch on Seattle channel. Thanks again, Seattle channel, for streaming. The chime that you will hear is also a 10-second indicator to wrap up your comments. Again, we appreciate you wrapping up your comments so that you don't get cut off. The first 2 speakers are Howard Gale and Angie Gerald. Good morning, Howard. Thanks for waiting.
Good morning. Howard Gale speaking on the budget and police accountability. Nashville, San Diego, Oakland, San Francisco, Long Beach, California, Sonoma County, California, Newark, Portland, Oregon, Columbus, Ohio, Salt Lake City, Atlanta, Honolulu, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh. These are some of the many U.S. cities that have recently established a robust police accountability system built on a foundation of real civilian control of investigation, policy development, and discipline. It's 17 months after George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis and Terry Caver's murder by the SPD in Seattle. This city council has made police accountability an untouchable subject. The council has found it far easier to virtue signal than to act with virtue. Nowhere is this more obvious than in the case of the city budget, where some $30+ million are spent on the pretense of police accountability, forcing Seattle taxpayers to pay twice for a service they don't receive. Once to cover up police abuse and the second time to occasionally pay the victims. Given the recent scandals surrounding the OPA and the OIG, this council must start asking the hard questions as to what these tens of millions of dollars are being wasted on.
Thank you very much. And the next person is Angie Gerald.
Hello, my name is Angie. I'm a Seattle grassroots landlord from Ballard. I strongly support Councilmember Lewis's SDCI amendment to convene a small landlord stakeholder group, and also Councilmember Strauss's amendment to fund a rental market study in long-awaited follow-up to the City Auditor's 2018 report recommendations. It's critical that Seattle have a framework for understanding and engaging with small owner-operators to encourage more people to become and remain as housing providers during our city's housing crisis and long-term. The latest RRIO report showed the city lost almost 5,000 properties from the rental registry. The flurry of complicated new regulations and lengthy eviction moratorium have treated mom-and-pop landlords with the same broad brush as large corporations, and corporations are the winners. This is decreasing availability and affordability of rental units, especially affordable family-size households. It's increasing barriers to community ownership and equity building. Please support the Small Landlord Stakeholder Group and the rental market study. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next 2 speakers are Brady Nordstrom and Kate Rubin. Good morning, Brady.
Good morning. Hi, my name is Brady Nordstrom, and I'm with Seattle for Everyone. I'm calling in to support budget amendments related to the study of design review and OPCD comp plan resources. We strongly support the statement of legislative intent for SDCI to study program outcomes, process improvements, and equity within Seattle's design review process. We believe that a diverse group of organizational community stakeholders are best equipped to work with SDCI to find the right set of solutions to improve parts of the program that are not working, unnecessary or exclusionary, and then to try to fix them. Aesthetics and neighborhood character must not be a barrier to housing inclusion, affordability, and sustainability. We also support amendments that increase funding for OPCD to have the necessary resources and staffing to do robust and equitable community engagements related to the comprehensive plan, the major comprehensive plan update, as well as thorough environmental review that includes growth alternatives for additional housing capacity in diversity in single-family areas and 15-minute neighborhoods. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Kate Rubin's next, followed by Corey Brewer. Good morning, Kate.
Good morning. My name is Kate Rubin. I'm a renter living in District 2, and I'm the organizing director at B Seattle. As proud endorsers of the Solidarity budget, we are calling on the Council to adjust the Mayor's budget to fully meet our community-generated demands. We support the Solidarity budget's commitment to addressing our dual crises of affordability and homelessness. We can't adequately fund housing in this budget without maintaining the integrity of the Jumpstart Seattle spending plan. The Solidarity budget is calling for an investment of $635 million in affordable housing, $25 million to develop a stable, equitable, quality workforce in homeless service and housing, and $1 million for ongoing tenant education and organizing, which helps to ensure that the more than half of Seattle residents who are renters know their rights and are able to stand up against unfair living conditions. Additionally, I wanted to voice my support for some important proposed budgetary amendments. Councilmember Sawant's proposed amendment of an additional $500,000 to support renter rights education and organizing, and Councilmember Strauss's proposed amendment of $200,000 for rent trend reporting and enhanced landlord registration are both essential in the wake of the pandemic. Councilmember Morales' proposed amendment of $2 million for.
Thank you very much. Corey, you're next, followed by Charlotte Thistle. Good morning, Corey.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Corey Brewer calling, a member of a number of housing groups locally, including Seattle Grassroots Landlords. I want to thank you for proposing a small housing provider stakeholder group. Personally, as a representative of hundreds of small mom and pop housing providers in Seattle, what we've been asking for is a seat at the table to help create effective and sustainable housing policy. So the idea of a stakeholder group is definitely a step in the right direction. And I have a feeling that the data on housing supply loss must finally be resonating with the members of the Seattle City Council, so I appreciate that. I'm not entirely clear on how you're putting this stakeholder group together, but I would like to be considered as a member. And a personal thank you to a handful of the council members who have taken the time to meet with our group personally recently, and again for the overall consideration of the stakeholder group. Thank you.
Thank you for dialing in today. Good morning, Charlotte. Charlotte's followed by Anna Marie Dooley.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thanks.
Hello? I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Charlotte, yep.
Okay, great, thank you. I wish to thank Councilmember Lewis for proposing the much-needed small landlord stakeholder group. Over the last several years, mom and pop landlords in Seattle have been disproportionately impacted by legislation and pandemic eviction moratoriums. Many have lost tens of thousands of dollars in equity or unpaid rent. Others have been forced to tolerate abusive and destructive tenants who've been enabled by carelessly written policies. According to the City of Seattle's 2018 rental housing study, 60% of Seattle landlords make less than $75,000 per year. Our group, Seattle Grassroots Landlords, includes school teachers, artists, stagehands, single moms, and even city employees. We want to be part of the solution to Seattle's housing problems, and our voices need to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna Marie will be followed by Jennifer Hawk. Good morning, Anna Marie.
My name is Anne-Marie Dooley. I'm a doctor and a member of Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility. We need a solidarity budget to ensure climate justice is addressed without delay. You know, last June we crossed a threshold with over 400 people dead in a heat dome here, and thousands will die every year from heat in the years ahead. And what's been missing in budgets past is a failure of imagination and an assumption that business and community members will not accept big change. Well, the last 18 months have shown us that people can radically change their behavior if lives are at stake. We need a massive investment in people, tens of millions to remove fossil fuels from homes and for local climate resiliency projects. I'd like the Council to understand that the survival of people in Seattle is more important than a commitment to the status quo. The solidarity budget's not an activist wish list. It's critical for keeping people alive. Thank you.
Thanks for calling in. Jennifer will be followed by Ala Hassan. Good morning, Jennifer. Jennifer, I can't hear you. If you can hit *6 on your line. Looks like you're still muted, Jennifer. After Jennifer will be Ala and then Liz Hussar. Jennifer, it looks like you're still muted. I'm going to move along and we're going to keep you on the screen. *6, Jennifer. Can you hear me, Jennifer? Okay. Ala, you're welcome to hit *6. Wonderful. Good morning.
morning. I'm Ala Hassan, the Volunteer Programs Manager with Low Income Housing Institute, and I'm reading the following letter on behalf of the Community Advisory Committee of Camp Second Chance Tiny House Village in support of Councilmember Herbal's budget amendment. We are the Community Advisory Committee for Camp Second Chance. We thank you for this opportunity to respond to the proposed improvements at our beloved Tiny House Village. We say ours because all of us have been deeply involved at this village since its inception, and we consider them family. We believe in and work toward the dignity of every individual. From the start, the site has posed challenges for the lack of water and sewer, creating less than ideal standards of living. Lack of sewer has always been a bone of contention. The city didn't want to make the investment, and yet we have always believed that when all people experiencing homelessness are housed, this site would become a city park. Putting in a sewer line now invests not only the dignity of the current village, but provides the infrastructure for a future park. The other improvements bring the site up to par with the sister villages, alleviating historic inequities. Installing paved paths.
Thank you so much. And we are going to Liz. Good morning, Liz. Liz is followed by Poppy Handy.
Good morning, buenos dias. My name is Liz, and I am currently the Youth Programs Manager at El Centro de la Raza. I'm here supporting the addition of a $2 million allocation to DEEL for culturally responsive after-school programs for middle and high school students to prioritize the support of immigrant and youth and their families. Supporting this investment is exactly the kind of infrastructure our community needs. After-school programs have proven time and time again that intervention during critical times can make all the difference. Research also demonstrates that a positive sense of belonging to school and community make all the difference for youth navigating the pipeline. Our program offers exactly this while also being unique in the model we offer. Our model is one that should be replicated. Our students who walk through our doors develop their critical consciousness under their roof. They become advocates for themselves and those around them. All of this while maintaining their grades, passing every class, and reporting that sense of belonging both at school and with us. We ask that you vote yes in this amendment, and we hope that you'll invest in the potential of our Latino students. Mil gracias.
Thank you so very much. And Jennifer, we still have you on the line here, so if you unmute. Excuse me. Good morning, Poppy. Thanks for being on the line. Poppy's followed by Alice Lockhart.
Hi, this is Poppy Handy. I'm the Managing Director at Third Place Design Cooperative, and I've been an architect in Seattle for 25 years. I'm speaking on the Design Review Statement of Legislative Intent, and I support the statement to study program outcomes, process improvements, and equity within Seattle's design review process. SDCI's analysis should happen in close coordination with a group of diverse organizational and community stakeholders. A truly broad group of stakeholders is best equipped to find the right set of solutions to keep the helpful parts of design review intact while boldly reforming the parts that are not working, are unnecessary, or exclusionary. We should ensure that design review is welcoming and inclusive to those from diverse racial, gender, socioeconomic, professional, and housing backgrounds. For example, renters and homeowners at all levels, including applicants, board members, and public participants. The racial equity toolkit analysis is critical to understand how the program might reinforce racial exclusion or create barriers to participation, and we should fully understand the link between housing affordability and Seattle's design review. If it has become a barrier to urgently needed affordable housing.
Thank you very much, Poppy. Good morning, Alice. Alice is followed by Maria Caceres. And Alice, there you go. Good morning.
Good morning, Council. I'm Alice Lockhart, and I organize with 350 Seattle. We strongly support the Green New Deal amendments for transitioning low-income homes off oily heat, for Indigenous-led sustainability projects, and for community climate resilience planning. I'd also like to thank Councilmembers Strauss and Gonzalez for amendments that expand the budgets for comp plan to allow for sufficient community engagement and EIS alternatives. We know the comp plan needs to include zoning changes as recommended by the 2019 UN emissions report, but we also know that the comp plan process needs to be driven by the voices and the needs of the communities most harmed by past and current zoning and the displacement pressure it has produced. Resilience in times of adversity absolutely requires community support. A climate resilient comp plan requires a plan and, frankly, funding that will center the community voices and reverse displacement so that communities can support each other in place. Thanks for expanding comp plan funding.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And Maria will be followed by Flora Luna. Flora, it looks like you're not present, so please dial in. And if you're not present, we'll go to Bertha Castaneda. Good morning, Maria. Buenos dias.
Good morning. I am Maria Castros, and I am the after-school program coordinator at El Centro de la Raza. And I agree with the dollars allocated for culturally responsive after-school programming for middle school and high school students. Through our program, we've been able to assist youth of color and their families in a variety of ways. For example, with academic tutoring, rental assistance, and food support, just to name a few. Overall, our program is made to inspire critical thinkers through community building and ethnic studies programming so that they can be leaders in the community. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And Flora, it looks like you're still not present. Please dial in. We'll come back to you. Bertha, you are up next. Just hit *6. And Bertha, you'll be followed by Patience Malava. Patience, it also has you not listed as present. Bertha, can you hear me? *6. There we go. Please go ahead.
Hola, buenos días.
Hola, buenos días. Sí, puedes empezar.
Sí, mi nombre es Berta Castañeda y estoy aquí apoyando al programa del Centro de la Raza para que voten por un sí para que el programa después de escuela del Centro de la Raza continúe apoyándonos. El programa ha sido de mucha ayuda para todos los hispanos, ¿verdad? Los latinos. Los programas que provee el Centro de la Raza han sido de mucha ayuda en tiempos de pandemia y pues pedimos que nos apoyen con su voto, con un sí para que el Centro de la Raza continúe, porque pues sin esas ayudas el Centro de la Raza no podría seguir brindándonos ayuda, ¿verdad? Y pues les pedimos de su voto. Es todo, muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Y voy a traducir. Gracias por llamar. Thank you so much. I'm going to translate very quickly. Thank you for calling in. Good morning. My name is Bertha. I'm calling out to support the El Centro de la Raza child care program. I hope you vote for supporting child care at El Centro. This will help us continue to keep the doors open, and this program helps everyone, especially our Latino community in Seattle. This has been an especially important program, especially during the pandemic. I hope that you vote to continue El Centro de la Raza child care program. Without it, we can't continue this good work. We ask for your support and your vote. Gracias, Berta. Patience, it looks like you're still not present. Camille, you are listed next. Camille Baldwin-Bloney, followed by John Grant. Good morning, Camille.
Good morning. My name is Camille, and I'm a resident of Seattle City Council District 5. I am calling on the City Council to continue their commitment to BIPOC communities, greater public safety for all Seattle residents, and leading the way in climate sustainability by supporting the Solidarity Budget and the Green New Deal. I'm urging the City Council to support the Green New Deal amendments, including $13 million for transitional low-income homes off oil heat and support for impacted workers, $100,000 for community climate resilience planning, and $300,000 for Indigenous-led sustainability projects. We're all seeing and experiencing the effects of climate, as evidenced by the record heat waves this summer. Retrofitting homes with pumps makes cooling possible. These are simultaneously a public safety issue as well as a climate justice issue because low-income people are more likely to live in homes which are not energy efficient. As Seattle experiences more and more deadly heat waves to wildfire smoke and winter storms, we need a plan.
Thank you very much. And please send the rest of your comments in. John, followed by Develina Bangari.
Good morning, Chair Mosqueda and council members. My name is John Grant. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for the Low Income Housing Institute. I'm here to testify in support of reinstating the Jumpstart spending plan for more affordable housing and also in support of Councilmember Herbold's proposal to improve conditions at the Camp Second Chance Tiny House Village. Of those, there are going to be a number of budget amendments put in front of the council today to make some equity improvements at the tiny house villages, and the Camp Second Chance is one of the most important ones. This will add a sewer line to the site for about $80,000, as well as add a hygiene trailer to replace porta potties. Camp Second Chance is one of the older villages, and we need to make investments to make sure that we have high quality standards at each of our shelter locations. So I urge you all to please vote yes on the budget proposal by Councilmember Herbold to improve conditions at Camp Second Chance. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. And we have Jennifer, you are still on our list here. So Jennifer Hawk, you are welcome to unmute at any point. We'll come back to you. Patience Malaba, we'll come back to you next. I see you dialed in. Develina Bangari is our next speaker though. Develina? Just *6 to unmute yourself. Okay, Develina, we'll keep you on the line here. Patience, please go ahead. I see you unmuted.
Thank you, Chair Mosqueda. Good morning. I am Patience Malaba with the Housing Development Consortium. I'm calling to speak in support of Councilmember Mosqueda's amendment that will align Jumpstart Fund expenditures with the Jumpstart spend plan and fund policies and ensure that the ongoing Jumpstart investments in affordable housing are protected by reinstating $50 million of Jumpstart funding to affordable housing this year. Jumpstart is a predictable and reliable funding source that we know will bring $235 million next year, and 2/3 of that should be for affordable housing. And as you know, housing providers need to be able to depend on this fund and know that the investments are reliable and predictable. And reinstating this funding is really a step in the right direction of ensuring that reliability and sustainability. And we want to thank you for championing that work and look forward to continue to partnering with you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And Develina, followed by Mimi Santos. Develina, just *6 to unmute. Okay.
Hi.
Wonderful. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Debulina Banerjee, and I am a policy analyst with Puget Sound Sage. I'm reaching out to ask you to support the Green New Deal priorities in the 2022 budget, including the $30 million for transitioning homes off of oil heat, $380,000 for Indigenous-led sustainability projects, and $100,000 for community climate resilience planning, as laid out in the Solidarity budget. Specifically on oil heat, Seattle has an estimated 15,000 homes which use oil heat. Converting these homes to clean electricity would mean cutting Seattle's climate pollution from buildings by 16 to 18%. Oil heat has been proven to worsen indoor air quality, and especially with the high cost of transition of $18,000 per household, it is a cost burden for low-income households, especially for low-income communities in South Seattle, who are already burdened with high exposure to pollution due to their proximity to the port and the industrial zones. We urge you to allocate the $30 million towards this program and make use of this opportunity to tackle Seattle's climate pollution in a just and equitable way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For folks tracking along at home, we are up to 20 speakers. We did say we would go to 10:08, so we will try to get through the next 8 speakers here. And the next person is Mimi Santos, followed by Lucy Vera. Good morning, Mimi.
Hi, my name is Mimi Santos, and I am part of El Centro de la Raza's after-school program. I am here in support of the budget amendment to reallocate resources to DEEL for culturally responsive after-school programming for middle school and high school students. It is such a privilege to be part of this program, which creates a safe space for youth of color. Our Latinx youth feel empowered, heard, and invigorated to achieve whatever they dream. The work extends beyond the students and academic support and really creates a community and a place where once in the program, whatever we need, we have a place to go and people we can reach out to. The work El Centro de la Raza's after-school program does is so important, and I encourage you all to vote yes, to be able to make sure that this work continues, because it is so important and impactful to our students and our youth. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Lisi, followed by Michaela Hers. Good morning, Lisi. Just *6 to unmute. And as you're hitting *6, let's tee up Michaela. Lisi, *6 to unmute. Hello. There we go. Please go ahead, Lisi, and then Michaela, you'll be next.
Oh, hello. This is Michaela. Oops.
Okay, Michaela, 1 sec, okay? Thanks so much for holding. Lisi, please go ahead.
Yeah. Hola, buenos días. Mi nombre es Lisi. Mira, estoy llamando para un voto de sí. Yo estoy de acuerdo con la ayuda del programa Después de Escuelas del Centro de la Raza.
Ha sido de mucha ayuda para mi niña, de los programas que ofrece el Centro de la Raza. Ha sido mucha ayuda para la familia hispana durante esta pandemia. Nos han ayudado mucho. Entonces yo estoy a favor de un voto que donen para el programa. Gracias.
Gracias. Y voy a traducir. Good morning. My name is Lisi. I'm calling and asking for a yes vote in support of the school at El Centro de la Raza. Her daughter has had the benefit of going there, and this is a program that supports all of the Latino community. This has been very influential, especially during the pandemic, very important, and asking for your support, for you to vote in support of El Centro. Gracias por llamar. Michaela, thank you for waiting. Please go ahead. Oh, shoot. Sorry, Michaela. There we go. Gotcha. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, I'm Michaela Hers, and I am here today asking the council to continue funding for El Centro de la Raza. I am the after-school program assistant, and I'm working through AmeriCorps, and I've seen firsthand how the program not only nurtures and cultivates the students in not only academics, but in their dreams and aspirations, and also very much through cultural and social issues that need to be addressed and taught to our youth. It also is very important for us to continue helping their families in whatever ways we can, and hope to have the council vote yes on the budget.
Excellent. Thank you. Alexis Faye, followed by Matt Hutchins. Good morning, Alexa, excuse me. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Alexa. I'm a nurse and resident of District 4. I'm testifying in support of the Solidarity budget that would divest funds from SPD and ensure true public and environmental health and safety. The Solidarity budget allocation of $100,000 for climate resilience hubs would greatly benefit both my patients and the greater Seattle community. The city needs to expand the number of clean air and cooling centers so that every Seattle resident is within a 15-minute walk or bus ride of this life-saving infrastructure. Climate change is already here, and we need a Solidarity budget's more comprehensive Green New Deal demands, including $13 million for transitioning low-income households off gas and $380,000 for Indigenous-led sustainability projects to promote the safety of all Seattle communities. Furthermore, fully funding climate solutions will save money in the long run by addressing preventable diseases caused by pollution before they happen, as well as keeping people safe and healthy when climate disasters strike. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Matt, followed by Lisa Rivera Smith. Good morning, Matt. And just for the viewing public, we are going to try to get through the next 2 minutes and have Dennis Solis and Matt Remley, and we will try to see if we can get any more. Okay, I don't think we are going to be able to, though, so please go ahead. Matt, thanks for waiting.
Hi. This slate of amendments makes me happy. There are lots of high-impact programs that really deserve funding. I want to highlight a few. For STCI, Amendment 1, streamlining permitting, is just good government. 3, bringing online a new daycare is prohibitively complex, and facilitators would help. 4, tackling design review. It's a process that seems broken, takes more than 2 years, can be capricious, and doesn't have a great track record of inclusion or great outcomes. For OPCD, Amendments 1, 2, and 3 add resources to our comp planning process, and we need more outreach, more education, more accessible communication if we're to have it be a meaningful public event. And 7 and 9, EDI and the Longhouse are the kinds of reparative investments we must make. And then finally, Amendment 3 for the OSE. In 2021, we don't need to extract, refine, and transport fossil fuels just to collect foliage. Happy autumn.
Thank you very much. Lisa, followed by David Hines. David Hines is not present. Lisa, followed by Dennis Silis.
Good morning, council members. My name is Lisa Rivera Smith, and I serve on the Seattle Public Schools Board of Directors. I am here this morning to seek your support for the proposed amendment submitted by Councilmember Peterson and co-sponsored by Councilmembers Gonzalez, Morales, and Strauss for $500,000 to improve Seattle Public Schools bus routing technology, which our district desperately needs. Did you know that in this tech hub of a city and this day and age, we are still using paper bus routes to direct our hundreds of bus drivers as they stretch out across the city each weekday morning and afternoon? With your generous grant, we could put GPS routing software and tablets on each bus, which would have direct access to all metrics surrounding our transportation logistics. This would allow families to do things they cannot do right now, like track their students' bus with anticipated pickup and drop-off times, see when and where they get on and off the bus, and offer bus drivers point-by-point directions, and allow route updates to be instantly updated to reduce the service failures we currently suffer from because we use paper routes. I know I'm almost out of time here, but there's so much more I want to share with you. You can expect a phone call or email from me in the coming days, council members, so we can continue this conversation and get your support for this amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we will get the last speaker in here, Dennis Solis, followed by Matt Remley. And folks, we're going to have to call it at that for today. That consists of 30 speakers. Apologies for those who dialed in. We will have public testimony tomorrow and hope that you do send us your public testimony in writing this morning. Good morning, Dennis.
Good morning. My name is Dennis Sills, and I work for Plymouth Housing. Thank you for considering prioritizing affordable housing in this proposed budget. We support $750,000 for the Office of Housing for Workforce, but encourage additional workforce investments. We support increasing operations and service funds distributed by OH, with 3 projects coming online in the next year. The $89.5 million in new investments in housing capital relies on $50 million from coronavirus recovery funds. We encourage council to find a permanent funding source for affordable housing development like Jumpstart funding. And we thank council for adopting a plan to use a majority of Jumpstart funds for affordable housing. Plymouth also supports the Addressing Homelessness plan through the HSD. That includes $104 million for King County Regional Homelessness Authority. We encourage future KCRHA contracts to include cost of living adjustment. Lastly, we sent a letter in July to Mayor Durkin and the council for $1 million in.
Thank you very much. And Matt Remley will be our last speaker today. Good morning, Matt. Matt, you are still on mute. Star 6 to unmute. Matt, you are still on mute. Okay, and one more time. Thank you, everybody, for dialing in. Hi, Matt, go ahead.
Oh, I apologize for that. Good morning, council members, and thank you for the opportunity to weigh in my support for Green New Deal investments in the amendments for the budget. In particular, I want to express my support for the funding for oil heat transition, co-sponsored by council members Sawant, Pedersen, and Morales, as well as the funds for indigenous-led sustainability projects, co-sponsored by Herbold Morales, as well as the Community Climate Resiliency Plan, co-sponsored by Gonzalez, Morales, and Juarez. And I just want to express that this is the real opportunity for Seattle to live up to its commitment in the Green New Deal resolution it passed, and I look forward to the passage of these amendments. Thank you, and have a good day.
Wonderful. Thank you all for dialing in today. We did have a chance to hear from 30 speakers today. We're going to move on to items on our agenda and appreciate all of the work that you all have done to dial in today. Please send your comments to seattle.gov if you were not able to speak today. And again, tomorrow morning, public comment opens up at 7:30 a.m. for sign up, and we will have the first 30 minutes dedicated to public comment as well. Madam Clerk, could you please read item 1 into the record?
Agenda item 1, introduction of proposed budget amendments overview.
Thank you very much. And good morning, Director Handy. Thanks for all of the work you and your team have done. Really appreciate being able to have you on the line here this morning to get us kicked off for our overview. I also have some comments that I'd like to offer, and perhaps I will offer those after you provide a brief opening from the central staff's perspective, and then I will give you the chair's comments. Please go ahead, Esther. Director Handy.
Great. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Esther Handy, Central Staff Director. Welcome to the first of 3 days of discussion on proposed council budget actions to amend the 2022 proposed budget. As a reminder, this is the third phase of your deliberation. In the first step, executive staff presented their proposed budget, and you received input from the public on public comment and in an evening public hearing. Our second step was issue identification. our central staff team presented nearly 200 pages of analysis on this proposed budget over 3 days, identifying issues and options for your consideration. And since our last discussion, you all have submitted proposed changes to the budget. Our team has drafted those in amendment form, which you will be discussing today. During issue ID, we asked you to consider several key questions, which you are responding to in these proposed budget actions. The first was, do you agree with the way that the Jumpstart policies and priorities have been met in this proposed budget? And largely what we heard from council members was no, that the intent behind the policy was to provide a committed source of revenue to, one, provide continuity of services during the pandemic, and two, make large new investments in 4 key strategies: affordable housing acquisition, development, and services, an investment to sustain the Equitable Development Initiative, to advance a Green New Deal framework, and to spur economic revitalization. So we will start discussion this morning with the chair's proposed omnibus amendment to restore Jumpstart funding to these 4 programs in 2022 and an ongoing way. Second, we asked you to reflect on the sustainability of this budget, noting that absent new funding sources or deep cuts to some programs, many general fund support programs could not be sustained in 2023 or beyond. And so to prioritize, we asked you to reflect on where is there a cohesive policy strategy to address the most pressing issues the city's faced. I'll mention just a couple themes that have emerged in these 200 proposed budget amendments you have crafted that will weave through discussion over the next few days. The first is that affordable housing and anti-displacement strategies continue to be core. The second is that homelessness services are being really closely analyzed as we transfer city resources to the regional authority, making good on the city's commitment to taking a regional approach. The third, achieving community safety through alternatives to policing, is on everyone's minds as you ask how to scale these programs more quickly and determine if we have the right programs on the table. Fourth, many of you have proposed expansions of behavioral and mental health resources to meet the urgent and current needs of our community, and we expect robust discussion on those programs on Thursday. And finally, planning, parks, and infrastructure are a focus as you ask, are we adequately investing in our transportation infrastructure today? And do we have appropriate resources to engage our city in the planning projects ahead, like the major comprehensive plan update to build a livable and equitable city? So as you discuss the many proposals this week, I invite you to reflect on how individual budget actions move the needle on these key issues you have identified as we work towards a 2022 budget that can have a transformative impact in our communities. I'll hand it to Ali Panucci, Policy and Budget Manager, to orient you to the process for discussing proposed budget amendments. Chair, would you like Ali to do that before we turn to you? Great, Ali, if you could just talk through the details.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Chair Mosqueda, council members. I'm Ali Panucci of your council central staff. If we could move on to the next slide. As Director Handy noted, we're on step 3 of the budget process and just under 4 weeks away from when you'll have taken final action on the 2022 budget. Next slide, please. Over the next 3 days, we'll present about 200 amendments that are organized thematically as outlined on the screen. We're looking forward to hearing from all of you about these amendments as we get ready for the next step in the process, which is developing the balancing package. And so I look forward to you seeing or hearing from all of my colleagues on central staff as they walk you through the amendments in these categories. Next step, please. Next slide, please. The balancing package is the next step in the process. The balancing package will be published on November 10th in advance of the second public hearing, evening public hearing that is scheduled during this budget process, and then will be presented in more detail to the committee on November 12th. Over the next 2 weeks, following discussions of budget amendments this week, we'll be working with the budget chair, who will be coordinating with all of you to determine what budget amendments will be included in the balancing package. In some cases, amendments may be modified or combined for inclusion in the package as we develop a proposal that reflects the priorities identified by all of you through these budget amendments. Unless there are questions about the process, I am ready to hand it back to the chair.
Thank you so much. I'm going to add a little bit to the process as well, and then we'll see if there's other questions from council colleagues. First, I want to thank Director Handy for your opening remarks, for the framing that you've offered for today as we consider the amendments in front of us. I think that the council has shown a lot of interest in similar priorities and greatly appreciate the work that central staff has done and the work that the committee members here today have done to submit various amendments. We know that there is shared values, shared priorities, and that this budget is a moral document. I am very hopeful that as we consider the amendments in front of us and go through the process over the next 3 to 4 weeks, we will have the opportunity to truly reflect a budget that is reflective of the council's priorities and thus the community's priorities. So thank you for lifting up those categories, Director Handy. Ali, thank you for walking through the process here today. I do have a few additional comments that I'll add to this, but really just want to thank you and Patty Wergen, Tom Mikesell, your entire team at the central staff for all the work that you've done in getting us to this point and for providing us with robust details and understanding behind each of these amendments. And colleagues, this is the first of 3 days. It's going to be long days. We will have a recess from 1 to 2 p.m. each day, and I will do my best to adjourn us by 5 p.m. We will absolutely have the opportunity to hear more about your proposed budgets, but I'll outline a few comments here so that you know the time frame in which we need to work within. I do want to note for the record, Councilmember Herbold has joined us a while back. Thank you, Councilmember Herbold, for being with us here today. And Councilmember Juarez, happy anniversary to you. Colleagues, thanks for submitting your budgets on time. There were nearly...
Thank you. I'm telling you, marriage, it's a hell of a drug. What am I going to say?
I got it in. Thank you for submitting your budgets on budget amendments on time. Colleague, you know that there was nearly 200 amendments all told that we will be considering this week. I hope that you were able to set aside some time yesterday to review the amendments that are under consideration for today. I hope you will also set aside some time later this evening or throughout the afternoon, maybe in our break, to review the amendments that we will consider tomorrow, and the same thing for Thursday. It is really great work that our council colleagues have done along with central staff to submit the amendments in front of us today. And thank you for all the work that you've done, central staff, to provide the necessary and factual description of the proposed budget actions for our deliberations today. As you saw from my memo yesterday, if you have additional information that you would like to provide about your budget proposals that is either more persuasive or dissuasive in nature, you are welcome to share those with the full committee here. This is a request that you send information that is an addendum in advance of our meeting. Thank you very much to the council members who submitted, who sent around additional information that they will then be able to point to in their conversations today before 5 p.m. the night before, so that folks have a chance to sit with it in the evening. You are not required to share additional information, but if you do decide to do so, thank you for putting it into one PDF so that it's all in one place, so that our offices can categorize those and keep them on hand for review as we consider the various amendments over the next few weeks. These will become part of the legislative record after the committee that they are presented in, so please note that we do have a lot to cover in the next 3 days. I will be keeping track of the time for each of the allotted amendments. There are about 3 minutes that, if you average it out, 3 minutes each for each of the amendments. That includes allowing central staff to provide a short overview, the prime sponsor to provide any additional information, and that allows for time for council members to ask a few questions. Obviously, there's a handful of amendments that won't require a lot of discussion or questions, so we will continue to track the clock, but I am going to try to keep us on time. So if you see me come off of mute and ask you to please wrap it up, it is so that we can make sure that we stay on track. Again, if we were to average each amendment, we'd have about 3 minutes each, so please do provide short remarks, and I will do my best to do the same as well after I get through these opening comments. We have also received a number of budget amendment requests that were not submitted on time, meaning that they didn't come in via email before noon on Monday or did not meet the co-sponsorship requirements to be considered with the official process. But given the amount of walk-ons that we have interest in, we will be able to allow for those to be considered by doing what we did this morning. I will make a motion to amend the agenda to consider those amendments. Amendments that are being drafted by central staff for walk-on will be sent to you before 5 p.m. the day before, so that will fulfill the commitment of the committee rule that it requires distribution before 5 p.m. on the preceding business day. A reminder to folks that those additional amendments we will be hearing at the end of each of the allotted category by department. Thank you again to Central staff for your work on those walk-on amendments as well for our consideration today. For example, we will have 3 walk-on amendments, and we're going to make sure that we include those in our time allotment that we are giving to each of these sections. Finally, colleagues, I want to just note at the top of our discussion here, given the large number of amendments, again, nearly 200 amendments this year in total, to both streamline our discussion and the process, I am asking council colleagues to limit the number of new co-sponsorship requests that you may have. You do not have to add your name to indicate support. The number of co-sponsors on an amendment does not impact the likelihood an amendment will be considered for the balancing package. Just like with the co-sponsorship request for the amendments that were submitted for the CBAs, showing co-sponsorship does not also equal a vote later. So I want to make sure that folks don't feel like they have to raise their hand and add their name to an amendment at this point. Very much interested in the discussion and any questions that will help inform our conversation, but please do not feel like you need to add your name to every amendment. And for the viewing public, if you don't hear a council member add their name to an item, it is not an indication of non-support. I absolutely want to hear about all of the 200 amendments, and I want us to be very, very limited and judicious in putting your hand up if you want to add your name for the record to an amendment. Please be selective in doing so. Thank you in advance for exercising that restraint. And if there is interest in additional co-sponsorship, of course, I will note it for the record. But thank you very much for your willingness to be conservative in that aspect just for process sake this year. Appreciate it. Finally, just a note, revenue forecast is also coming on November 3rd. So we don't expect a large swing one way or the other, but we will all, as a collective, including me, receive that information together for the first time on November 3rd. That may give us an opportunity for having future discussions about how to address any news that we receive on November 3rd. I want to thank Council President Gonzalez, who's been working on this along with my office and the team as well. As we set up a revenue forecast, it will be transparent and public when we receive that information in years in the future, and we are going to keep ourselves to the same requirement that we get the information as soon as other council members do as well. Now, colleagues, we have a tight agenda today and also have shared a lot of information about process before we get into the amendments. Are there any questions about process for central staff or for myself? All right, let's do it. 10:25. Madam Clerk, will you please read item number 2 into the record?
Agenda item 2, Finance General for briefing and discussion.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Central Staff. Central Staff will provide a screen for us as you see here. This is a summary table. At the beginning of each of our sections on the agenda, you will see a summary table with the effect statement noted it through the title. The sponsor will be noted, the co-sponsors that have submitted their names to make our discussion today possible will also be noted, and then we'll turn it over to the prime sponsor for a very short comment. I am going to be up first, so I am going to have to lead by example here, and I will do my best. This is a large amendment, though. It is an omnibus amendment, so please allow me a little bit of grace as the chair here, since it is so large and then very foundational to how we set up our budget going forward. Allie, anything else? Please take it away.
Thank you, Chair Mosqueda. We will start with Amendment FG1A1, and as Chair Mosqueda noted, in sort of estimating the amount of time we had for amendment, we did assume more time for this one as it has more than 64 transactions and makes a lot of moves, and we want to make sure it's clear to everyone what is going on with this amendment. So with that, I am going to ask for this one if we could jump to page 8 of the packet. That is the attachment to the amendment. This amendment, sponsored by Chair Mosqueda and co-sponsored by Council Members Lewis and Council President Gonzalez, would align the Jumpstart Fund expenditures with Jumpstart Fund policies that were passed by the Council in July 2021 that codified as a fund the spending plan that had been previously adopted in Resolution 31957. It would also align community-led investments with one-time resources. This ensures that ongoing Jumpstart investments in affordable housing, economic revitalization, Green New Deal and the Equitable Development Initiative are protected as ongoing investments as anticipated in the fund policies, and will eliminate the need to amend the policies, the Jumpstart policies, in order to implement the 2022 budget. This amendment also adjusts the amounts in the 2022 proposed budget for the Equitable Communities Task Force recommendations, participatory budgeting, and community safety investments previously authorized by the council. This includes the community safety capacity building RFP and the funds to support the community safety initiative. This will ensure that there's at least $70 million to spend in these areas in 2022 and frees up about $40 million of general fund to support other council priorities. I'll just note here that the next amendment, FG2A1, complements this budget action. It expresses council's intent to work with the executive to identify a new ongoing funding source for the community-led proposals in 2023 and beyond. And if we could jump to the top of page 9, table 1. The first action in this amendment is to reallocate about $60.5 million of one-time federal Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Act funds that I'll refer to as Clipper funds moving forward, to revenue replacement in the general fund. These funds will ensure that city programs and services needed for COVID response and recovery efforts are maintained in 2022, and that Jumpstart funds are allocated as intended. This also shifts the fund source for the child care stabilization grants and the expanded capital investments in affordable housing production, preservation, and services from the Clipper Fund to the Jumpstart Fund. We could move to the next table 2 at the bottom of page 9. The next step is to adjust the amount of funding for the community-led investments that I described previously. In looking at this table, you can see that when combined with the unspent dollars that were appropriated in 2021, this results in more than $70 million of funds available to spend in 2022 in these areas. It also revises the proposed budget to make these one-time investments rather than ongoing until the council and the next year's mayor are able to identify funds to support these investments in an ongoing nature. And if you could move to the next table at the top of page or midway through the next page. So the combination of steps 1 and 2 that I described is what allows for the freeing up of resources for other council priorities and allows us to make adjustments to the proposed budget to make expenditures for 2022 consistent with the Jumpstart Fund policies. So this table outlines how this amendment would modify proposed expenditures from the Jumpstart Fund. The second column that's labeled ORD 126393 outlines what we would expect to see in the budget if it was aligned exactly with the Jumpstart Fund policies as passed by the council. The column highlighted in green is what is in the proposed budget as transmitted by the mayor. And then the column with the blue heading proposed amendment outlines what transactions would occur in this amendment to realign spending with the spend plan policies. So there are multiple steps and many transactions. I want to thank my colleague Tom Mikesell, who co-authored this amendment with me and was critical in getting all the pieces together. And with that, I'll pause for any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Pursuant, I'm going to actually make a few comments here, and then you can ask questions of central staff and myself, if that sounds okay. Thank you so much for your patience there. And again, thank you, colleagues, for giving me some grace on this larger amendment because of the sheer amount of changes involved here, and we will do our best to keep ourselves on time going forward. I will just be very brief. Ali, thank you for pointing to page 8 of the packet. Colleagues, I do ask you to look at those 3 simple bullets that summarize the amendment in detail. This omnibus revenue correction amendment aligns Jumpstart investments with our publicly vetted Jumpstart spend plan, a spend plan that was not only discussed transparently, but was provided with a signature and was allowed to go into law. This is a way for us to ensure stability and transparency in our investments from Jumpstart in housing, economic recovery, Green New Deal investments, and Equitable Communities Initiative. based on the Jumpstart Spend Plan for the fund policies in 2022. And after that, the city has a very firm commitment to continuing to invest in these priorities by percentage category. This year, we anticipated that of the amount coming in for the investment dollars going to those priorities, about $149 million should be going to the Jumpstart Spend Plan. Again, this should have included $97 million going to affordable housing. Instead, the mayor's proposed budget allocated $44 million from Jumpstart and backfilled $50 million using one-time federal funds. It was supposed to include $23 million going into economic revitalization. Instead, about 13% was diverted, 13 million was diverted to other priorities, and 14 million for each of for Green New Deal investments and 14 million for equitable development were our commitments. In total, we want to make sure that we are correcting for the approximately $62 million that would have been diverted from these Jumpstart priorities to other areas outside of the priorities. Those other priorities may be very important as well. So we have identified a one-time fund source in many cases using federal dollars to allow for these investments to continue to go forward. We are not making a choice in this amendment here about whether or not something gets cut. Everything that has been included in the proposed budget here is being funded. We are simply swapping the fund source and making sure that we are maintaining our commitments as outlined in the spend plan. Specifically, I want to note the importance of this for affordable housing investments. We codified making sure that there was a known amount, nearly $100 million this year was supposed to go into affordable housing. Why? Because there's tremendous need. Over $100 million in projects, submitted requests for this year's NOFA. Currently, we were only able to provide about 35 million. We also know that there was 100 projects that applied for the Strategic Acquisition Fund that was made available from the Mercer Mega Block sale. We know that there's tremendous need, and we are going to be also partnering these investments with the ability to basically bank on future Jumpstart funds so that we can increase the NOFA spend for projects that have submitted requests for this year as well. And providing stable funding investments, especially for housing, is critical so that planners can leverage these city funds and acquire additional financial streams for both capital and thus then future operation services. We need to have predictable known sources, especially in affordable housing, to be able to allow for building to start now. And all of the areas that this council unanimously passed through the spend plan, Green New Deal, equitable development, economic resilience, and housing, all have been prioritized so that we don't see reductions in those amounts. If we see a reduction in the amounts this year, we can assume that the base year budgets going forward will have that reduced amount, and we are very interested in correcting those revenue streams. And then along with this will come the next amendment, which is a slide to commit to working to identify additional revenue streams, especially for things like the Equitable Communities Initiative and a future alternatives to public safety grants. Obviously, there could be multiple revenue streams, and we'll talk about that slide in just a minute here. That slide as well, I'll note, is something that from the Solidarity budget, they're interested in creating a task force, and we're going to be working with community to identify additional future revenue. But let's, at this point, correct the revenue streams so that we don't see a reduction in the services that we had committed to, nor consequences in terms of less funding now and in base budgets in future years. I'll take questions now. Councilmember Sawant, please go ahead.
Thank you. I just have a few questions to understand the amendment in terms of numbers. And so if you don't mind, Ali and Chair Mosqueda, I'll just go ahead and ask all of them and then let you all respond. So when the budget amendment says that it restores the payroll expense tax for Green New Deal and affordable housing, am I right that what that means is it restores it to the reduced level suggested by Councilmember Mosqueda's ordinance over this past summer, just given the economic crisis and everything? And if it was restored to the original spending plan that was passed by the council when the council passed the budget, it would have required much more funding for housing and Green New Deal. So that's one question. Am I right about that? And then am I right that this budget amendment does not substantially increase funding for housing and Green New Deal? That is, if it does make changes, then Am I right in understanding that it does so by a small amount, and instead that this budget amendment primarily swaps around the sources of funding? And I think Chair Mosqueda addressed this partially, but I just wanted to go ahead and ask that. But that it does the swapping, but it does not have a substantive impact on the amount of affordable housing or Green New Deal programs that the city can fund. That's another question. And then the third is, when this budget amendment says, quote, adjust the amount of funding for the community safety investments and other things in a manner that when combined with the unspent 2021 carry forward results in more than 70 million of total investment in these areas, that what that actually, am I right that what that actually means that this amendment is cutting the funding allocated in 2022 for the ECI, the Equitable Communities Initiative, participatory budgeting, and community safety investments, and the amendment talks about recognizing carry forward? Am I correct in my understanding that that means that the funding that the Black Lives Matter movement won last year for this year has largely not been spent, so then it is being carried forward to next year, and this budget amendment is cutting next year's funding for those community investments and basically explaining it by saying that there is money left over from 2021. Is that correct? And how much in total does this amendment cut from those three sources of BLM community funds if it does that? Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Swan. I think I've noted down all the questions, but please let me know if I've missed anything. So to your first question about whether or not the amendment would restore the fund, the amount of, or align the Jumpstart spending with the Jumpstart Fund ordinance that was passed in 2021 or the original spending plan. Current law would allow for up to $85 million of Jumpstart Fund to support the base general fund expenditures in 2021 and beyond. So this amendment does in fact align the spending with current law and not the previously adopted spending plans that have since been amended through adoption of the Jumpstart Fund policies. So they are a less amount. I would just note that absent that support from the Jumpstart Fund to backfill general fund revenues, the council would be looking at about $80 million of cuts to base services. So that was why you all made that decision, I believe, to allow for that expenditure. But what this amendment does do is say that unlike the proposed budget, it won't allow that use and dependence on the general fund in an ongoing basis. As general fund revenues start to rebound, assuming that they do, the amount of Jumpstart that could be used to support base services would be reduced. So you are correct that much of this amendment is aligning the spending with the policies and isn't significant changes right now in the amount of spending in the categories like affordable housing and Green New Deal. In the affordable housing category, the amendment does increase the amount for investments in housing by about $8 million, and it's a very minor adjustment to the Green New Deal. But again, importantly, what it signals is that on an ongoing basis, those amounts shouldn't be reduced in future years' proposed budgets and should in fact increase significantly as general fund revenues rebound. In terms of how we're talking about the community-led investments, last year the council passed a budget that included one-time funding for the Equitable Communities Initiative Task Force recommendations for participatory budgeting and for some of the community-led investments. The proposed budget would add the same amount in 2022 by relying on a larger proportion of the Jumpstart Fund. So it's relying on a revenue source that wasn't intended for those specific purposes in several cases, and and would continue to rely on that in an ongoing nature. And my understanding is that the intent was for the participatory budgeting investment area, as an example, there was $30 million appropriated in 2021. About $27.2 million is still remain in finance general that is awaiting the process pieces being set up so that those decisions could be made. An additional $30 million was added to the is in the proposed budget for that use. The reason this amendment is looking at sort of acknowledging the carry forward is that next year that could result in almost $60 million being available for the participatory budgeting process, and it could be a big spending cliff if there is not an identified ongoing revenue source. And so this allows for freeing up of other resources, but it is reducing the amount in the proposed budget and acknowledging the carry forward to ensure that the same amount of dollars, $30 million in 2022 is available, but acknowledges that underspend. And then in terms of how much from each bucket, if we could scroll back to page 9 of the bottom of page 9 of the packet, that table summarizes the 2022 appropriation. So in the blue columns, let's see, the green is what was proposed. The blue, the first 2022 appropriation is what this amendment would appropriate in 2022. The middle column is the funds that will not be spent in 2021, and then the total amount available for 2022. And I'll just acknowledge that the community safety line, that's inclusive of $3 million that the council approved to increase the amount of funding available for the community safety capacity building RFP in the mid-year supplemental budget. That has not been spent, and our understanding is that that will not be spent or contracted for in 2022, or excuse me, in 2021. And I think I covered all the questions.
Thank you so much, Ali. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Swan. And we'll talk a little bit more about the Equitable Communities Initiative PB investments here in the next amendment as well. Colleagues, any additional questions? Okay. Ali, I want to thank you. Thank you very much to you and Tom and the central staff team. Hey, Tom, I see you on the screen here. Thanks for all of the work that you've done to help align Jumpstart priorities with Jumpstart investments. Even the revised spend plan that the council passed into law earlier this year to create the siloed fund and maintain the investment percentages. Every time we've passed that spend plan, it has been a unanimous vote by all council members. So I really appreciate, colleagues, the work you've done on this spend plan, and we will continue to see the revenue increase. Because we know that there's an increase in the level of companies who are remarkably successful and have high paid employees in this sector. We've continued to see a growth in the tech industry specifically, and the number of startups that our city is home to has only grown, especially in the wake of COVID. We also know that the revenue will continue to stabilize. So we're going to see a continued decrease in that amount that we have allowed for as an offset to avoid austerity budgeting and to really make sure that we kept government services whole in times of crises. We will continue to see that go down. So the full percentages, for example, 62% going into affordable housing, will continue to grow, even though that percentage remains constant year over year. And it is critical that I think we have a base budget in this year and going forward that reflects the investment percentages that the council had committed to in that spend plan. If there's no questions on this omnibus amendment, I will move on to number 2 here, Ali.
Great, thank you. So FG2A1 is a statement of legislative intent sponsored by Chair Mosqueda and also co-sponsored by Councilmember Lewis and Council President Gonzalez. And I'll just note that this was one request that we've broken into 2 amendments. This statement of legislative intent would does express the council's intent to work with the mayor to identify a new ongoing revenue source to support the Equitable Community Initiative, the participatory budgeting program, and the community safety investments previously authorized by council in 2023 and beyond. And as I noted previously, this complements FG1A1 there are a number of changes and in that amendment that changes the investments in those areas and makes them one time rather than ongoing. But this is confirming council's intent to work next year to ensure that investments in these areas are continued in future years.
Thank you very much. So as the prime sponsor on this, I'll speak to it very briefly. I'm also interested in continuing to work on this language to make sure that it reflects what the participatory budgeting request has also suggested, which is a task force to come up with recommendations for various revenue streams in the future. Obviously, there's a continued desire to make sure that investments in alternatives to public safety do continue to come from a reduction in traditional policing. In addition to that, there is a call for additional revenue and progressive revenue at that to come in. So we want to make sure that we're pulling together a task force, that we continue to identify strategies to identify progressive revenue sources, and that could also include reductions to existing services that are going towards traditional policing. B, we also want to make sure that we are continuing our commitment to keep these investments at $30 million for participatory budgeting, $30 million for Equitable Communities Initiative Task Force recommendations, maintaining the investments that we have committed to the Human Services Department Community Capacity Safety Grants, which was $10 million, and we added $3 million from our underspend from SPD, bringing that to $13 million. I want to maintain that in 2022. And we also have $4 million, as we've talked about before, that was not in the mayor's proposed budget for gun violence and youth diversion programs. That total of $77 million would be maintained in the 2022 budget, again, truing up any spend that happened in 2021 to reflect the full 30, and then $17 million investment, so that each of those categories have the amounts that we had committed to in 2021, recognizing that many of the task force members were able to get some of those dollars out the door, about $16 million. Participatory budgeting, as I see Councilmember Morales' hand is up here, may have comments about additional information on the status of participatory budgeting. We know they are ramping up their work right now and are on the precipice of being able to help provide recommendations to this council in early 2022. So we want to make sure that they have the full $30 million as well. This is a statement of legislative intent that I think dovetails with many areas of the budget, but specifically wanting to make sure that after this year, there is not a cliff. That is the biggest concern with the proposal that we've received from the mayor's budget, that there would be an actual cliff at the end of 2022, where either half of the projects or half of the funding would end up going away. And we want to create stability and true investments to the tune that we had committed to before. So that's what this statement of legislative intent does. Councilman Morales, I see your hand first. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I do want to acknowledge you and thank you for including this slide. We know, as you said, that our Black and Brown neighbors have been clear that they want to see a meaningful shift in the way we allocate resources in the city so that we can fund more upstream investments and investments. Part of that conversation, part of that strategy is for things like participatory budgeting to be funded from a shift away, a permanent allocation away from SPD. So as you said, that process is still in development. We'll get a chance to see next year how the 30 million in investments can support efforts to build up alternatives to community safety. So I'm looking forward to that process. And it is my intent that this participatory budget process does remain an ongoing effort in the city to allow for community-driven priorities and to share access to power and to resources with our neighbors. So I appreciate this slide being in here, and I look forward to working with the chair and with the mayor and the task force to identify how we will begin to baseline projects, investments like this in the future.
Thank you very much. Any additional comments or questions? All right, seeing none. I appreciate all of your work on this. Let's keep going. Number 3 here.
Hi, this is Karina Bull with Council Central staff, and the next council budget action is FG3A1. It is sponsored by Councilmember Morales and also Councilmember Herbold and Gonzalez. It would add $620,000 to multiple funds and finance general reserves to fund a Juneteenth holiday that is being proposed as separate legislation, also sponsored by Councilmember Morales, that would be considered by the Governance and Education Committee in mid-December.
Councilmember Morales, any additional comments?
No, just as a reminder, this is acknowledging the day that we commemorate that enslaved persons in Texas were informed about their emancipation, about the Emancipation Proclamation 2 years after the end of the Civil War. And as Karina both said, would provide support for this to become a paid city holiday. We know it's already a federal, state, and county holiday, and also provide a parking holiday on June 19th.
Thank you very much. Thank you for bringing this forward. Really appreciate your work on this. I'm not seeing any additional questions. Let's move on.
Okay, I think the next one is for Greg Doss. I will go ahead and read it in. The next one is FG4A1. This amendment would add $50,000 to finance general reserves for harbor buoys and signage. This is sponsored by Councilmember Morales and co-sponsored by Councilmembers Strauss and Juarez.
Any additional comments? Okay. Please go ahead, Councilmember.
Sorry. Yes. Thank you, colleagues. I just wanted to, sorry, my notes are getting lost. Okay, so as Allie mentioned, this would provide additional larger buoys and rule signage in Andrews Bay. And with this amendment, the intent is that Parks and the police department work together with members of the boating community to develop a plan for implementing the buoys and the signage to improve water safety and to report back to the Public Assets and Native Committee next spring. Colleagues, I shared a lot of information over the summer about issues that we're having with violations of the noise ordinance in Andrews Bay, but more importantly, with issues of water safety. The south end of Andrews Bay includes the Seward Park Swim Beach, and we lost our lifeguard on duty hours this summer. And so it's a place where there's lots of kids who are swimming. Hundreds of people anchor their boats in the bay over the weekends. We've got lots of people who recreate on paddle boards and kayaks. So it's just really important that we provide greater signals to the boating community that they have to observe water safety rules. So after discussion with the Recreational Boating Association, we agreed that safety could be improved with visible buoys that include improved signage about knot speed, about no wake zones, as well as information about the noise ordinance. And so that is the proposal that we allow for better signage so that boaters who are coming into the bay are aware of the different rules that apply to them, so that the swimmers and other folks who are not in a boat in the bay have greater safety in the area.
Any additional comments? I'm not hearing any. Thank you very much, Councilmember Morales. Let's move on. Are we ready for the next section of our agenda here?
Councilmember Mosqueda, there's one more in FG section.
Oh, sorry. Please go ahead, Brian.
Thank you. Good morning, council members. Brian, good night, council central staff. So the final item in the FG category is FG 5A1. This council budget action would add $2 million of one-time general fund to finance general reserves for the creation of 4 permanent public toilets in areas of the city with the highest concentration of neighbors living unhoused. The item requests that the executive form an interdepartmental team to work on implementation and that a status report be provided to the council's select committee on homelessness strategies and investments, or its successor committee, by June 1st of 2022. The primary sponsor for this item is Councilmember Morales, and it is co-sponsored by Councilmembers Strauss and Lewis.
Please go ahead, Councilmember Morales. Anything else to
add? Yeah, I just, it's clear that we need public toilets in this city. We've been talking about this for a long time. We had a whole campaign about it a few years ago. This proposal really is intended to support the neighbors who are experiencing homelessness, but also, families who are walking around downtown, gig economy workers who need a place to use the restroom as they're delivering food and whatnot, bus drivers, tourists, anyone who needs access. And what I do want to say is that the proposal includes not just the infrastructure, the plumbing, and the actual facility itself, but staffing as well. What we know from the way these programs have worked in other cities is that they are most successful when it includes good paying jobs for people to supply and clean and keep the restrooms staffed. So that is the intent here. We know that over half of the people living unhoused in King County are people of color. We know that over half, almost 60% of workers in the gig economy are people of color. And we know that, the ability to access a restroom is something we all need, but we really need to consider who is being disproportionately impacted by this lack of access. So I'm eager to begin this as an annual investment. We can talk about that later, but I do think it's important that as a city, we begin to build out this infrastructure, our public toilet infrastructure over time. So I want to start this year with a $2 million investment that ideally would get in the ground by the end of next year so that we really can become the world-class city we want to be. That means having world-class public toilets too.
Wonderful, thank you. Council President Gonzalez, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chair Mosqueda. I wanted to thank Councilmember Morales for lifting up this really critically important public health need in our city. We've all spent some time with the city auditor's report that talks about the dire need of publicly available restrooms that are well maintained and permanent and available to all people in the city of Seattle. And so for the reasons stated both in that audit report and for the arguments that Councilmember Morales, the sponsor of this amendment, just made, I would like to be added as a co-sponsor of this amendment.
Thank you, Council President Gonzalez. Council President Gonzalez, adding your name to FG005A001. Thank you very much. Councilmember Sawant.
Very briefly, just wanted to add myself as a co-sponsor to this as well.
Councilmember Sawant also adding her name to FG005A001. Okay, thank you very much, colleagues. Before we move on to another category, Allie, I think I should just double check with you at the end of each section to make sure that there's no additional walk-on amendments. If there's a walk-on amendment, you can help flag it for me before we move on. Does that sound right?
Yes, that sounds great. I will note it if there's a walk-on.
Okay, so seeing no additional walk-ons in this section, let's go ahead and move to the next section, Finance and Administrative Services. Madam Clerk, can you read item number 3 into the record?
Agenda item 3, Department of Finance and Administrative Services for briefing and discussion.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Please go ahead.
Ann Gorman, Council Central Staff. The first council budget amendment is FAS 1A1. It is sponsored by Councilmember Strauss and co-sponsored by Councilmembers Herbold and Morales. It would add $200,000 in one-time general fund to FAS for a consultant-led study of public safety staffing on city waterways. The goal of this work would be a baseline for best staffing practices and recommendations that are both based on other cities' resourcing of this work.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Strauss, as the prime, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Colleagues, as Ann Gorman just mentioned, this would add $200,000 to contract with an outside independent consultant to conduct the analysis of staffing and capacity needs to ensure public safety and just all types of safety on our waterways. This study is needed to understand what our water-based safety needs are. The question, what is the level of service we need on our waterways? The answer to that question is currently unknown. We have seen an increase in both recreation, paddleboarding, kayaking, folks who are renting these kayaks and paddleboards. We've also seen an increase in boating, power boating, both small and large craft. This is occurring both on Lake Washington, Lake Union, and out on the Puget Sound and Salmon Bay. And we've had two things occur in the last number of years. We've had this increase in recreation, and in this last year, we've had Harbor Patrol have about half of their staff go on long-term leave. And Harbor Patrol has previously been the one, and Seattle Fire Department as well, been the two entities responding to these crises. Last night, Seattle Fire Department responded to a potential kite kite surfer off of Alki, but the call was there wasn't anyone to be saved. There's a great tweet about it if you want to take a look at it. I digress, and just to say that this study is important because we need to understand what the comparisons to other waterfront cities are with water staffing needs. When I was in a North Seattle Industrial Association meeting this morning, it was reminded that even before Harbor Patrol had half of its staff go on long-term leave, we only had three vessels on all of our waterways. And the question came, is that even the right staffing? Is that the right level of service? These answers are unknown at this time. And we need to have a third-party consultant, much like the National Institute for Criminal Justice Reform just produced the study for us, better understanding how we need to transition our calls away from gun and badge responses. We also needed a third-party independent consultant to tell us what are our staffing needs on our waterways. So that, because if we don't know what the benchmark is that we need to meet, we can't create a pathway to meet it. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Chair and colleagues.
Thank you. Councilmember Herbold, please go ahead.
Just very quickly, I want to thank Councilmember Strauss for bringing forward this action. It does continue some work that I believe Councilmember Strauss also led last year in the form of SLI, a statement of legislative intent. That SLI didn't quite get us the information, and I think that many of us are looking for, not just about what the needs are on our waterways, but who can best do that work. So really appreciate that we're giving it another shot with an outside consultant.
Thank you, Councilmember Lewis. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councilmember Strauss, for bringing this proposal forward. There's obviously a big maritime contingent in my district that's very concerned about the Harbor Patrol. This is more for the viewing public and some of our Harbor Patrol stakeholders. I just think it's evident, as we have such a high rate of attrition in the Seattle Police Department, and under no scenario could there be recruiting or retention to immediately replace all of that attrition, and that ultimately Harbor Patrol staffing is going to an extent be contingent on the priority the department puts on refilling it. I just really want to emphasize that this is also a very necessary action to see what can be done to change the staffing plan to have a functional Harbor Patrol. I don't feel like I'm speculating too much to say that in the near term, it likely won't be a high restaffing priority in terms of deployment decisions made by the department, which makes this study very necessary to figure out how we can maintain those critical services in a different way and in a more adaptive way. And this is the first step in that direction, and just appreciate your leadership in bringing this forward, and think that this is something we definitely need to be doing.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, council members. Okay, let's move on to the next item.
Hello, council members. This is Eric McConaughey, your council central staff, and I'm introducing FAS 2A1. This is sponsored by Councilmember Strauss. It would add $227,000 to general fund, ongoing to FAS, to add 2 FTEs, 2 positions to the Seattle Animal Shelter. This is also sponsored by Councilmembers Morales and Councilmember Lewis.
Any additional comments, Councilmember Strauss?
Thank you, Chair. Briefly, this amendment would fund 2 positions at the Seattle Animal Shelter to better meet the needs of the shelter. While the shelter is not in my district, that's in District 7, oftentimes people forget about the animal shelter because it is in a nondescript building in Interbay. This building and this program serves the entire city. The 2 positions, the first position is a behavioralist, which is an existing position. Unfortunately, it is currently temporary and funded by grants and donations. The importance of a behavioralist is that they work with the animals to improve behaviors, they facilitate adoptions, and work with adopters to ensure animals do not need to be returned to the shelter. And by making this behavioralist position permanent, it'll help the animal shelter continue to being a leader in ensuring that dogs in all animals are able to change their behaviors rather than unfortunately need to be put down in some circumstances. Seattle Animal Shelter is a leader in making sure that dogs and other animals don't have to be put down, and that is because of behavioralists. So this position would make sure that that position is permanent, and if they are still able to have grants and donations, it would expand their ability to rehouse animals in a meaningful way. The second position is for foster care manager. This is a position which Animal Shelter has previously had, but was unfortunately cut several years ago. Currently, volunteers are struggling to manage so we have volunteers managing our foster care system for the animals that are in the animal shelter. They are struggling to do this, and they are working with hundreds of foster parents. The importance of this is that while the animal shelter is a leader, it is still reliant on having animals in confined spaces with other animals nearby, and this can create behavioral issues that we were just talking about with the behavioralist. And so by having foster homes to have these animals living in during their short time at the animal shelter, it provides them a safer and more adjusted place to live. So these two requests are connected, ensuring that animals stay adopted and ensuring that we have a way that we're not relying on volunteers to keep these dogs in homes rather than keeping them in the shelter during their time with us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Strauss. Any additional comments? Okay, wonderful. Let's move on to action number 3.
The third action is FAS 3A1. This would provide spending, general fund spending in FAS for animal control officer patrols in city parks. This is sponsored by Councilmember Herbold, and it's also co-sponsored by Councilmembers Morales and Strauss. This action would impose a proviso on the animal shelter budget summary level in finance and administrative services, and it would restrict $388,000 of general fund spending to be spent only on 4 animal control 1 officer positions dedicated to enforcing these and scoop laws in city parks. That amount of $388,000 is generated from calculating the annual cost to support those positions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Councilmember Herbold. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. This is a topic that I hear from constituents who are seeking additional off-leash and scoop law enforcement in city parks. I think it works very well with the proposal from Councilmember Strauss. Councilmember Strauss's proposal would add positions for animal control. This does not impact that priority. Instead, what it does is it takes a look at the existing positions that are unfilled. There are a number of vacancies, and FAS has noted the challenge that they've had in hiring new animal control officers in the last few years. And so what this would do is this proviso would not add more positions, because we felt that it would make sense to add more positions given the vacancies, but it would increase the number of existing positions that are dedicated to animal control in parks from 2. Right now, there are only 2 for all of the parks in the city to 4, and with the goal of, again, of additional monitoring of parks, in the hopes that folks who have dogs will adhere to our off-leash laws and our scoop laws. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you both. Okay. I'm not seeing any additional questions. Moving on to FAS 004.
Council Budget Amendment FAS 4A1 is sponsored by Councilmember Lewis and co-sponsored by Councilmember Juarez and Councilmember Strauss. It would request that the executive provide recommendations about and draft amendments to the city's short-term rental ordinance. FAS is the department that administers that ordinance. Currently, renters can only operate short-term rentals in a specific area of the downtown, and this amendment is based on the objective that all tenants in the city should be able to offer their primary residences for short-term rental use.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Lewis, anything to add?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I would just say that there's been some interesting requests in the community about an area that was not envisioned in our original short-term rental ordinance, which was, what about a scenario where there is a tenant who does, for a short period of time, say 3 days, want to offer their primary residence, where they are the resident tenant, for some kind of opportunity where it could be listed on some kind of short-term rental company, Airbnb, I guess, being the most famous one, but there are other short-term rentals that have this kind of model in their business model. I think for obvious reasons, it was not envisioned initially in the original ordinance for the possibility of displacement of renters, for the possibility of taking space that should be rental stock and potentially turning it into a speculative investment. I think it is a little bit different when you look at cities that have a model that have a resident tenant requirement, where that is the primary residence of the tenant, and they're, for example, offering it as a short-term rental opportunity when they themselves are out of town. So I think there's ways to potentially explore and revisit this to see if it would potentially provide an opportunity for tenants to take advantage of some of these laws that we have around short-term rentals, as long as it does not have a demonstrable negative impact on housing supply or a impact on increasing the cost of housing. And that is really what this SLY would get toward, is examining this question and seeing if it's time to update this requirement so that we're not, locking so many of the people in the city out of being able to participate in this kind of economic activity, given that we are a majority renter city, and given that there are cities that are doing this currently. I think Denver and Atlanta are currently doing some variation of this. So that is essentially what is being requested here, and I'm happy to answer any additional questions, or more accurately, I'm happy to direct additional questions to Anne. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Councilmember. Any additional comments or questions on this one? Councilmember Juarez, please go ahead.
I'll be very brief. You know that all through the city, but particularly I can speak to District 5, we are now 51% renters. So we have a market there, and I think it's a really good idea that we have tenants working with landlords for economic opportunity, for we can look so we can avoid displacement and actually have a relationship that works well for short term, that renters have the same access to the same economic activity. As you know, people are obviously more transient, and the economic activity that would provide, at least I know for sure in District 5, with the onslaught of well over 3,000 more units coming online, not just market rate condo ownership, but rental units. And so I think this is a great opportunity for us to explore what's there for us across this whole city. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Morales?
This might be a question for Anne. I think what we're suggesting, or what's being suggested, is allowing tenants to basically sublet their units if they are gone, which I think is a cause for eviction. So I just want to get a little bit of clarity of what we're discussing here.
The amendment is specific that this proposed new use by tenants is only permissible when they have the permission of the unit's owner or property owner's representative. There may be some owners who decide that they don't want to make this opportunity available to tenants, but for those who do, this amendment would allow something that is not currently permissible under the city ordinance.
Any additional questions? Okay, thank you very much, Anne. Thank you, colleagues, for your questions. I don't see any additional questions, so let's move on to FAS 005.
Good morning, council members. Asha Venkatraman with your council central staff. FAS 5A1 is sponsored by Councilmember Lewis and co-sponsored by council members Herbold and Morales. It would add $360,000 of general fund to FAS to establish a victim compensation fund and provide for community-based organizational support. The fund itself would be $100,000. $50,000 is intended to go to an organization to conduct outreach to victims that have experienced financial loss and may be eligible for compensation from the fund. And $200,000 would go to a organization of community members to build out a longer-term restorative response to the criminal legal system, including how such a fund might be housed in the community. And I'll pass it over to Councilmember Lewis.
Thank you, Asha. So this is sort of two things combined into one request. So the first is simply put a victim compensation fund to fill a really critical hole that we currently have in our restorative system locally. A cornerstone, as all of us here know who have been very involved in this, of restorative justice practices is to make victims whole as part of the process of community-based accountability. Restorative justice does not ask victims to not seek some kind of redress for a harm that they've experienced. And in the city of Seattle, where we have a local criminal legal system that revolves entirely around misdemeanors, there are many cases in a given year that involve some level of loss, typically for a small dollar amount. Otherwise, it would not be a misdemeanor. It would be in the King County Court as a felony. So $100,000 would go a long way toward being able to repair damage to property, cover minor expenses related to misdemeanor assault injury recovery, money for property damage like to a window, things that end up in a misdemeanor court, and is really critical because under the current system where you have an overwhelming majority of defendants in the Seattle Municipal Court who are completely indigent and likely to unfortunately remain indigent for the pendency of resolving their case. Restitution is typically ordered to be paid by that defendant, but as they are essentially judgment proof, no one ends up getting paid because it is simply not possible for people to get compensation from completely indigent defendants. This would provide a mechanism to make sure victims are whole. I can speak from personal experience as a prosecutor that most victims in our municipal court just want to be made whole. They don't necessarily want to come forward and litigate against a criminal defendant to seek a criminal sanction if there is a restorative alternative. This makes restorative alternatives viable and allows us to continue to build into that kind of a system. The last thing I would say to mention the second part of this, there are also massive inequities in our current system in the ability of defendants who have been the victim of a crime who similarly are experiencing extreme poverty, have low trust of the existing system, or are just difficult to find given the existing ways that we communicate with victims, who are never even contacted to determine if they would like to seek compensation or if there is a way to reach them to even get that compensation in the first place. So part of this would be capacity building for community-based organizations to be able to establish contact with the full scope of victims that interact with our municipal court through credible community-based organizations to make sure that people who are eligible to receive compensation under this fund are in a position where they can actually seek out and get that compensation. Whereas under the current system, there's a very high rate of people just refusing to even communicate, to even seek compensation for a variety of reasons. I would add that organizational capacity building probably has lots of other tangential benefits that go beyond the compensation fund, just in building capacity in restorative justice-based organizations like Choose 180 and Community Passageways, to name a couple of examples that the council is familiar with. In terms of building their ability to do system navigation and victim support beyond just delivering this compensation fund, which is why I think it's best articulated as sort of two requests. So $100,000 for the compensation fund, and then another set of money in this proposal for broader capacity building for restorative justice programming. So with that, I will turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Herbold.
So much. I just want to add a couple things. These recommendations are, I think, very, very timely in that they are addressing what we're hearing from a couple of different sets of experts who work in this area. The city attorney's office has been participating since 2020 in the cities and counties for fine and justice work as part of Public Health Seattle County's grant team. And that particular working group recommended that the city attorney's office set up a victim compensation fund. Similarly, the community task force on criminal legal system alignment had a series of recommendations specifically focused on victim restitution. And I just want to say thank you to Councilmember Lewis for bringing this forward, but also thank you for making sure that the recommendation does incorporate the guidance from the Community Task Force on Criminal Legal System Alignment and is consistent with the principles of that task force.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Strauss, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the sponsor and co-sponsors for this smart policy addition to the budget. I would like to add my name to the list. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Strauss. Councilmember Strauss is adding his name to FAS 005. Councilmember Strauss, thank you. Okay, appreciate it. Let's continue on. Brian, I see you up there, FAS 010.
Thank you very much. Yes, so this should be the last item in the FAS category, FAS 10A1. This council budget action would add $80,000 of one-time general fund to FAS for connecting Camp Second Chance in West Seattle to the sewer system. The primary sponsor for this item is Councilmember Herbold, and it is co-sponsored by Councilmembers Morales and Lewis.
Councilmember Herbold, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. So this is one of three budget actions related to Camp Second Chance. The three budget actions taken together would enable expansion of Camp Second Chance to include an additional 20 tiny houses and address some very long-standing issues, as we heard during public comment today. This particular item provides for a sewer connection. The second item is a proviso under SPU. It will proviso funds for Seattle Public Utilities for hygiene trailer service. And the third action will be a walk-on during the HSD discussion on Thursday related to funding for construction of 20 new units. These three actions together would help address long-standing issues at the site. Currently, the site is not connected to a sewer line. So for more than 5 years, Camp Second Chance has been at this location. Villagers have had to use porta potties and have not had regular access to showers. My office shared materials by email yesterday evening, noting that tiny house villages provide outcomes that are associated with exits from tiny house villages into permanent housing at the rate of 47.4%, and 6% have moved in. I'm sorry, 47.4% have moved into permanent housing, and 6% have moved into transitional housing in 2020. And so, consistent with the council's efforts to expand tiny house villages, led by Councilmember Lewis, I'm looking at expanding a existing, longstanding, successful camp that has really brought our community together. There's a lot of engagement and mutual aid by a network of religious facilities and volunteer organizations who have over the last 5 years come together to support Camp Second Chance in a variety of different ways, and looking forward to your support to expand that. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. There's a few hands. Councilmember Lewis, then Sawant, then Council President Gonzalez. Councilmember Lewis, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I really appreciate all of these three measures that Councilmember Herbold just foreshadowed for Camp Second Chance to be expanded. Really a cornerstone of our effort around It Takes a Village to expand shelter capacity. And I know that over the course of this last year and a half, this council has been really united in pursuing an aggressive strategy of shelter expansion that has not always hit with being embraced by other stakeholders external to the council. But a key cornerstone of that strategy has been looking at opportunities, not just for the establishment of new villages, but if it's faster and takes care of siting considerations, which has been a barrier to siting new villages, enhancing and expanding existing villages where possible. Camp Second Chance is a great opportunity to do that, and also to make good on very long overdue promises to bring it up to the same quality of life that our other tiny house villages are experiencing. And I really appreciate this opportunity in this budget cycle to make good on all of those commitments and really provide more capacity for our overall tiny house system, while really making sure Camp Second Chance remains a great place to live in shelter while transitioning to housing.
Well said. Thank you, Councilmember Lewis, and thanks for your work on tiny house villages, as well as Councilmember Herbold noted. Councilmember Sawant, please go ahead.
I would like to request to be added as a co-sponsor to this amendment as well. I remember when Camp Second Chance was established, when a community member took bolt cutters to unlock the gate on this unused city property to allow for an unpermitted encampment, initially only consisting of tents. The then Mayor Ed Murray threatened to sweep this encampment, and my office and other organizations, advocacy organizations, visited with the residents who had established a democratic community to support each other. And my office then joined them in demanding the mayor not sweep this encampment. And now it has tiny houses. It has a long history of helping our homeless neighbors get back on their feet. And I strongly support providing basic utilities to this highly successful tiny house village, which is a good example for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Sawant. Councilmember Sawant adding her name to FAS 010. Councilmember Sawant, thank you. And thanks for that historical context as well. Council President Gonzalez, please go ahead.
Yeah, just wanted to also request to be added as a co-sponsor. Appreciate Councilmember Herbold lifting this up. We've all had a lot of conversations about tiny home villages and their ongoing viability as part of the spectrum of interventions that we offer individuals who are in need of safer housing options as we work to scale up those permanent supportive housing options and transitional housing options. And one of the things that we continue to hear is making sure that we are improving the conditions at the tiny house villages. And I think that this is a key way for us to continue to improve the conditions while we stay focused and not lose focus on those midterm and long-term strategies that are going to be necessary to ensure we are connecting people to their forever home. So appreciate an opportunity to signal support on this one as well. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Council President Gonzalez. Council President Gonzalez adding her name to FAS 010. Thank you very much. I do have a question, perhaps for the sponsor or for central staff, perhaps for Councilmembers Lewis and Gonzalez, who are part of the Regional Homelessness Authority Oversight Board, on all of the items related to tiny houses, for example. Do we have conversations, assurances, commitment that when we advance priorities specific to any one tiny house village or tiny house village supports in general, that there's ongoing commitment and implementation that will be followed through from our partners at RHA? And I see Councilmember Lewis on screen and Jeff Sims as well from Central Staff. Please go ahead, Councilmember Lewis.
All right, I'll go first to give you some cover, Jeff, and then you fill in if what I've said isn't sufficient here. But I would say, Madam Chair, to speak specifically to this, where we are expanding an existing village, I think this squares perfectly fine within the architecture of the assets we are handing over to the Regional Homelessness Authority, because this is not strictly speaking expanding the number of villages, but rather expanding an existing one. So I feel pretty confident stating that. In terms of broader system expansion, I know that the Regional Homelessness Authority would like to build up and then assess the entire system, envisioning the 6 new villages that this council has funded and that are anticipated to be stood up. 3 of those villages are opening this fall, and 3 additional villages will be stood up in response to an RFQ that the authority is issuing, and that's expected to happen in the first quarter of 2022. So that some of that might have been incorrect, so I'll hand it over to Jeff, but that is my current understanding of where things stand. But I would say that in terms of this coming in, this Camp Second Chance considerations coming in addition to that, I would imagine that would be fine because we're expanding an existing village.
Great. Jeff, anything to add?
A few things for the record. Jeff Sims, Council Central Staff. Councilmember Lewis, I don't think you said anything that was incorrect there. I just would add a couple different additional points. First, to your direct question, Madam Chair, we don't have direct assurances that a addition earmarked for a specific village to enhance certain things going on at it would be followed through on. That hasn't been a conversation that we had needed to have at this point. I will note, however, that the Lived Experience Coalition has issued statements that would seem to align with these types of improvements being made at Camp Second Chance, and the Regional Authority on Homelessness is very focused on centering the voices of people with lived experience. In addition, the conversations that Councilmember Lewis referred to for the continued expansion of tiny home villages and the forthcoming issuance of an RFP by the Regional Authority on Homelessness all envisioned levels of service along the lines of, actually having plumbed toilets, not porta potties, things along those lines, so that it would be the type of facilities that people that experience homelessness currently would be willing to utilize. So this seems in line with other statements that have been made on the quality of services that the authority is interested in ensuring are provided at any of our shelter locations, though these types of ads that would be earmarked to a certain location have not directly been addressed.
Very helpful. Thank you all very much. And that is good news, I think, for other various amendments that we'll be considering as well in the next 3 days. All right. I believe we are at the end of FAS. Are we ready to move to item number 4? Great. Madam Clerk, could you please read item number 4 into the record?
Agenda item 4, Legislative Department for briefing and discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And good morning again, Director Handy.
Thank you, Esther Handy, Council Central Staff. This is Action Leg 1A1, a council budget action to add $600,000 in general fund support to the Legislative Department. It is sponsored by Council President Gonzalez and co-sponsored by Council Members Peterson and Mosqueda. Specifically, this action would fund 2 existing positions in the Central Staff Division that were vacant and unfunded in 2021. It would restore funding to the City Clerk's Office for an administrative role and several job reclassifications, provide funding to address pay equity for council staff, restore funding to the council consulting budget, and finally be used to prepare the council chambers for hybrid in-person and virtual meetings when mandated telework ends.
Thank you, Esther. Council President Gonzalez.
Thank you so much, Chair Mosqueda and Director Handy, for that initial description. So colleagues, as you might recall, the Legislative Department did take nearly a $700,000 cut with the 2021 budget in order to support citywide 5% budget reductions that were necessary due to the pandemic-related economic conditions. So the additional funds proposed in this council budget action are necessary to partially restore the cuts that the Legislative Department realized in 2021, and is also necessary to address additional needs in the department's department-wide budget. So there are multiple vacant positions in different divisions within the department that were left unfilled for extended periods of time to accommodate the 5% budget reduction that we imposed in 2021. And with the city's recent economic recovery and the stabilization of our revenue projections, the Legislative Department has filled or plans to fill all of these vacant positions. The restored funding would also provide the council with a more substantial consultant budget after significant reductions to that line item in 2020 and 2021. And lastly, this council budget action would allow for new and additional spending in a couple of critical categories. The first would be technology upgrades to the council chambers to allow for a hybrid in-person and virtual meetings, as well as an increase to council member office budgets to address pay equity issues that have continued for the last 5 to 6 years. So the need for increased office budgets dates back to, again, 2015, when a fourth full-time equivalent was added to each council member staff, but only funded with 50% of the necessary funds for that additional FTE. So the impact of this action was that the typical legislative aid wage is well below comparable salaries in similar institutions, particularly as it relates to the King County Council legislative aid function and role. So this council budget action would create slightly more pay equity for those particular positions within our respective council member offices. And that is what is represented by the entirety of this particular proposed amendment. I do want to thank Chair Mosqueda and Councilmember Peterson for their co-sponsorship of this proposed amendment to the mayor's budget, and would appreciate others' support should they be inclined. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Council President. I do want to thank you for your work, Council President, for making sure that we were addressing this parity and equity need. I want to thank Cody Ryder as well for his work on this within your office. The department and legislative staff have been working very hard, as you noted, especially during COVID, to make sure that we're maintaining strong communication and services with residents, workers, and all of those who are seeking access to provide feedback and engage with the council. I think that this goes a long way to make sure that we are fully staffed and that we're working towards more equitable pay across the department. And I know that we are going to continue to do work and do more to address the legislative aids and parity investments there. I'm happy that the mayor's proposed budget brings a legislative pay up to 4 pockets, but we need to make sure that with medium households, income over $100,000, we have an incredibly diverse staff, and we know we want to make sure that we're investing equitably in our staff and lead as an employer as well. So I think this is a really important step forward, and appreciate the opportunity to partner with you. I see 3 hands. I believe Councilmember Morales, so sorry, I believe I saw Councilmember Peterson pop in first. He just didn't have his hand up. So I think I'll do Peterson, Morales, and then Herbold. Please go ahead, Councilmember Peterson.
Thank you, Chair Mosqueda, and thank you, Council President Gonzalez, for being the lead sponsor on this. I know several of us had similar ideas about how to bolster the legislative department. I'm very happy to support this amendment. It benefits the entire city government when the legislative department, the legislative branch, is appropriately staffed, and that we're supporting our workers here. There are only 100 or so legislative department employees, while there are 12,000 in the executive branch. And so we should not be shy about supporting our legislative department so that we provide the best service to our constituents and the city government and policymaking as a whole. So proud to co-sponsor this with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Peterson. Councilmember Morales.
Yeah, I'm interested in co-sponsoring too. Thank you.
Councilmember Morales adding her name to Ledge 001. Councilmember Herbold.
Thank you. I'd also like to be added. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Vice Chair Herbold. Vice Chair Herbold adding her name to Ledge 001. Council members, any additional comments? Okay. Thank you very much for your work on this. And we will move on to the next section. We're looking at agenda item number 5. Madam Clerk, could you please read that into the record?
Agenda item 5, Mayor's Office for briefing and discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And please go ahead. Hi, Yolanda.
Hello, good morning. Yolanda Ho, Council Central Staff. For the Mayor's Office, we have MO1A1, sponsored by Councilmember Peterson and co-sponsored by Councilmember Pursuant and Councilmember Strauss. This is a statement of legislative intent that would request that the Mayor's Office, Urban Forestry Interdepartmental Team, and the Urban Forestry Commission submit to the Council recommendations for creating an independent chief arborist position to oversee the city's management of trees, with an initial focus on the preservation of exceptional trees. This response would be due to the Land Use and Neighborhoods Committee or its successor committee by April 8th, 2022.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Peterson, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Mosqueda. Thank you, colleagues. I know we all want to do more to adapt to the crisis of climate change, and a key part of that resiliency is conserving what we can of the environmental infrastructure of our urban trees, because trees provide numerous environmental and health benefits. Currently, the management of our city trees is scattered across several departments, but there's no unifying leader who advocates for the tree infrastructure internally. Cities like Dallas, Charlotte, and others have chief arborists. Most cities have a lead city arborist who serves as the chief internal advocate for the urban tree canopy. Council members, this is merely a statement of legislative intent to have the mayor's office consult all the relevant departments and return to council with a proposal to create the position of chief arborist. The position could include a rapid review of removal of exceptional trees, which are typically the largest trees that provide Seattle with the most environmental and health benefits for our residents. During the recent heat waves, the cooling benefits of trees were reinforced and the disparate negative impacts of tree removals were laid bare. So I believe it's time for Seattle to have a chief arborist. Thank you.
Councilmember, do you mind repeating the cities that had a chief arborist as well that you noted?
A lot of cities just call them the lead city arborist. Those that call them chief arborists, Dallas, Charlotte, are just a couple that come to mind. When I was in Oakland, California, they had that position as well.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Peterson. I think one thing that we've heard about in the past has been how the arborist role is sort of shared in various departments. So is your vision that this chief arborist would be located in one place, but then there's the possibility of coordinating amongst different departments so to sort of enhance our existing organizational chart around this issue?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Council President Gonzalez, please go ahead.
Thanks, Chair Mosqueda. I did see that Lisa K came off of mute, so I'm not sure if she had something else to add. Okay. Thanks for that question, Chair Mosqueda. I was going to ask that question as well. Appreciate the response. I haven't had an opportunity to read the specific language in the slide, but Councilmember Peterson, can you talk about whether your slide includes any language related to racial equity in this particular position or analysis of sort of the underlying suite of potential recommendations that could be generated by this position?
I would expect that they would be required to do that would just be part of the creation of the position. But happy to add that language if it's not there already.
Yeah, I think that because the arguments around climate change are being made to support the creation of a chief arborist position, then I think it would be imperative that any kind of effort be driven by the city's environmental justice goals, and that there would be a strong racial equity lens imposed upon any creation of a new position and or defining of functions and priorities related to the body of work that would ostensibly be assigned to a chief arborist should that position be formed.
I totally agree. We would absolutely want that. In fact, we see the negative racial disparities actually with the removal of trees. So, and we want those health benefits and those environmental benefits to be where they haven't been in the past. So I would welcome that. And actually, Chair Mosqueda, in terms of, because the amendments as they're published online, happy to hear about whatever the process is. We're adding a sentence or deleting a sentence from the various amendments, but I know central staff is listening, so I fully support that clarity.
Excellent, thank you. This is a great opportunity for council members to identify those shared priorities and sort of vocally voice where you'd like to see some enhancements or clarification. Central staff, I think, is taking notes, as am I. So as we craft the proposed chair's package, including conversations like this, is going to be formative for the language that ends up in that draft budget for the council's consideration. And then obviously we will have an opportunity for further amendments once that draft budget is available for council members, and we can continue to offer clarity. But I, for example, am noting that you two are saying very similar things on this item, and we will absolutely work with you. And I see central staff nodding as well. Anything to add to that sort of process question, Allie?
Thank you, Chair Mosqueda. I would just note, to make sure it is clear, we will update and modify the amendments that will be part of the balancing package. But if there are items that don't end up in a balancing package and are not brought back for further amendment, we will not be updating these documents.
This is our launching point for those discussions. So thank you very much. Okay, Council President, thank you for that question and the clarification. Really agree with you as well. And thank you, Councilmember Peterson, for noting your interest in expanding upon that element. Okay, I'm not seeing any additional comments. Let's move on to item number 6. Madam Clerk, could you please read item number 6 into the record?
Agenda item 6, Office of City Auditor, for briefing and discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Lisa Kay. I would just note before I move on to this particular item that Tom Mikesell will have one walk-on CBA on the retirement system to discuss immediately after this item before we move to the next section on utilities. So moving to this particular item, Council Budget Action AUD 1A1 would add $562,000 to fund 3 auditors and 2 temporary half-time research and evaluation assistants to increase the Office of City Auditor's capacity to meet its expanding workload. The CBA is sponsored by Councilmember Lewis with co-sponsors Councilmembers Herbold and Peterson. So with that, I will turn it over to Councilmember Lewis.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Lewis.
Thank you so much, Lisa. So, I really sort of look at this almost in a similar vein to our capacity building in the legislative department itself. The Office of the City Auditor is such a critical resource for the oversight function of this council that really I think we should take this opportunity in this budget cycle to protect and enhance the ability of our auditor to really drive accountability in the delivery of executive services at the City of Seattle. I think that we've seen over the last couple of years a lot of really big conflicts in the public and disagreements in the public between the council and the executive over how executive services are delivered, the efficacy of executive services in addressing really big systemic issues like homelessness, transportation funding priorities, just to keep going down the list. And one of the biggest tools that we have as a legislative department is working with the city auditor, who is also a legislative branch official, which is not always made completely clear in the public, but the auditor is an independent official appointed by this council without executive input, and our ability to get exceptionally high quality, award-winning analysis and assessment from a great auditing team that has helped this council look into bridge funding. We have a pending audit on sidewalk repair that is going to come out, audits on all sorts of really big priorities that have come down related to public safety investments, related to homelessness policy, related to the navigation team, which have been validating of long-held council priorities and really shown that there are more efficacious practices that we can be pursuing as a city, and that we can empirically prove it by bringing forward this critical work from the Office of the City Auditor. Earlier this year, my office went to the auditor's office to explore what capacity enhancement could look like. And this is a proposal that the auditor's office has said would allow them to add considerably more ability to conduct council-requested audits, audits requested from members of the public, follow up on auditing recommendations that have been made have not been fully realized. And this is essentially the high watermark of what could be assumed in one budget cycle in 1 year. I think that this could considerably enhance our critical responsibility under the charter to maintain oversight of executive departments and also to drive more effective service delivery practices, as is our role as a city council in close partnership. And it'll allow us to pursue more of those kinds of initiatives than what we are currently outfitted to do. It would also bring us closer to parity with some of our peer governments. King County government, for example, invests a lot more in their auditor's office than we do at the city of Seattle. And I think that has led to King County developing a reputation for being an effective and well-run government. And I would like us to be in a position where our municipality is second to nobody, and being able to go to the public and say we have effective feedback loops. We believe in effective and efficacious services. And I think that this proposal gets us closer to that, and really helps us be in a position where we're really meeting that charter obligation for oversight. So with that, I will turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Lewis. Any additional questions? Councilmember Strauss, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanting to note that I rely on the auditor's reports for our policy making, and it's so critically important to understand if the policies that we are creating are meeting the mark in which they are intended. Just want to thank the sponsor for bringing this amendment forward, and would like to add my name. Thank you, Chair.
Very much. Thank you very much, Councilmember Strauss. Councilmember Strauss is adding his name to AUD 001. Councilmember Strauss. Council President Gonzalez, please go ahead.
Thanks so much, Chair Mosqueda. I want to thank Councilmember Lewis for bringing forward this additional item. I did want to just signal, I'm not going to advocate against this particular amendment, but I do just want to put a few things into the record for you, Madam Chair, to consider as you are evaluating this request. We will continue to, in my office as the chair of the Governance and Education Committee and the Council President, we will continue to have conversations with the sponsor of this item, as well as with Auditor Jones on the sort of practicalities of implementation of this particular request. I do want to note that the distinction here is one of whether we want to grow the city auditor's office in addition to addressing some of the budget reductions that they experienced last year. So the mayor's proposed budget does restore funding to the city auditor's office to allow for it to get to its baseline capacity that pre-existed the COVID related budget reductions. Our city auditor office was one of the only departments actually citywide that actually realized some budget impacts as a result of that reduction last year. And so I am pleased that the mayor's proposed budget included a restoration of the city auditor's budget to allow for it to get back to its baseline capacity. This proposal, however, what it is proposing is an expansion of the capacity from the baseline, and I would like to have an opportunity to have a conversation with the sponsor and with City Auditor Jones on whether the proposed increase in capacity as proposed here is one that can be operationalized and realized in terms of scale of the proposal, and whether or not there would be other revenue neutral ways to address the capacity concerns that have been put on the table via this amendment by Councilmember Lewis, including prioritization of other parts of the auditor's work plan, proposed work plan, which does get presented to the City Council for input and consideration, that might allow for those capacity issues to be addressed in a revenue neutral manner and reserve general fund dollars for other potential council priorities. So I did just want to note those early thoughts from my perspective for the record and for the benefit of the budget chair, who I know has a lot of difficult and challenging decisions to make in rebalancing and proposing a new balanced budget. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Council President, for that context as well. Appreciate it. Council Member Peterson, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Mosqueda. I definitely support this amendment. I do think we need to grow the city auditor's office. One of the reasons is that there is a growing body of work, such as the surveillance ordinance. There are things that the auditor has to review. These surveillance technologies that we're approving, the legacy ones, will have to get an annual review from the auditor, and that body of work is growing. And we've seen some very successful audits lately. The Seattle City Light audit that was done for Councilmember Mosqueda, and then the bridge audit that was done as well, received national recognition. And so I think it'll be beneficial to have the city auditor have that additional bandwidth. I know that several of us have thought of things that we needed to look further into requiring an audit, but we're told that there wasn't the capacity. So if there's a way to address the capacity issue, that would be the ultimate goal. And it does seem like it'll take some additional FTEs to do that, which I support. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councilmember Peterson. Any additional comments? Okay. As Lisa noted, we do have one additional walk-on item for retirement systems here. That's RET/walk-on/1. And that would be me who's bringing it forward. So please go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. Tom Maxa with your central staff. Before turning over to Lisa, who will cover ITD on the published agenda, I will discuss this walk-on amendment, which would add $248,000 from the retirement fund to the Seattle City Employees Retirement System, or SERS, for two retirement member services positions. At the October 14th meeting, the SERS Board of Administration approved adding these two positions to deal with workload issues in the member services function of SERS. The City Budget Office has indicated that the supplemental year-end supplemental legislation that's proposed during this process would add the two positions. This walk-on amendment would add the funding authority for the 2022 budget.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And as folks know, as part of the role of being budget chair, I also chair the Seattle City Employees Retirement Systems Board. I was not present at the last board meeting, but there was a vote at the board meeting to request the ability to add these two pockets. Again, as Tom has noted, this is funding that comes from within the Seattle City Employees Retirement Systems allotments already, so it has no impact on the general fund. I also have heard from members of ProTech 17 who represent members within SERS that they are supportive of making sure that there's sufficient staff to address the growing needs and capacity within SERS. SERS has a new pension administration system in 2019. The goal has been to make sure that we're keeping current with service requests while working through the backlog of requests. Again, we're trying to maintain our level of services that we've had over the last few years and make sure that we're making headway on the backlog and turnaround times. As you all know, across this country and in various departments here within our city, we've seen an increase in retirement service requests. So we want to make sure that we're providing employees and future retirees with high access to the SERS employees and making sure that any employees have access to get the information that they need. SERS employees have been working with employees out of class to try to meet the increased demand and are not able to stay current, let alone make progress on the backlog with the current staffing capacity. So I appreciate your consideration of this walk-on amendment. These positions are for one senior retirement specialist and one regular retirement specialist. And again, the second position would allow the two administrative assistant retirement specialists, both currently working out of class, to return to their normal duties. I appreciate all the work that SERS members and frontline staff have been doing in this time to provide high quality service to our retirees and current employees. Any additional comments or questions? Okay, thank you. I will also note that this is something that Director Ben Noble from the city's budget office has indicated will be part of their request for our year-end supplementals. So instead of having to address this later in a supplemental in 2022, my intent will try to be able to make sure that we're aligning those investments that are being requested for the year-end supplemental with next year's budget, and appreciate your consideration of this in our 2022 budget. Thank you, Tom. Okay, I think we're ready to move on to the next item on our agenda here. Madam Clerk, could you please read item number 7 into the record?
Agenda item 7, Seattle Information Technology Department for briefing and discussion.
Okay, this is the beginning, colleagues, of our second subcategory. We are lumping a number of departments into a general category of utilities. Could not function as a city without these multiple types of utilities being provided to our city. So thank you for your work on this. Please go ahead and let's talk about digital navigators.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lisa Kay again from Central Staff. I would note that this utility section will cover, as you said, information technology, the public utilities, and City Light. I'd also note that after I discuss the 3 ITD discussion or CBAs that are published in the agenda, Eric McConaughey will have a walk-on to present for ITD. So moving to the first published item, ITD 1A1 would add $697,000 to the IT department for a digital navigators program. The digital navigators would be community members with cultural competence and technical knowledge who'd help residents use computers, the internet, and applications to seek jobs, education, healthcare, and other services. This is sponsored by Councilmember Peterson and co-sponsored by Council President Gonzalez and Councilmember Juarez. And I will turn it over to Councilmember Peterson.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Peterson.
Thank you, colleagues, and thank you, Lisa Kay, for that introduction. Colleagues, in 2020, we unanimously approved the Internet for All resolution to accelerate our pursuit of universal access to and adoption of affordable, reliable internet services. And the digital divide was laid bare during COVID as residents struggled to have sufficient online access to jobs, education, healthcare, and other vital services. But the budget proposal from the executive needs more for digital equity. So I have 4 amendments that together would enable us to honor our resolution and push ahead with Internet for All. Consider it as a 4-legged stool needed to support Internet for All. The first is this amendment, a digital navigator program to help those new to the internet, including immigrant families, seniors, low-income residents, and others who benefit from technical assistance. The second is maintaining the recent increase in the technology matching fund for local nonprofits. We'll get to that later. There'll be Wi-Fi hotspots that we can add for libraries. That's in the library discussion we'll have later. And just a basic requirement for more accountability and transparency in the budget documents so that we can track the progress of Internet for All. This particular budget amendment, ITD 001A001, creates the Digital Navigator program to help those who need technical assistance to access and use the Internet for jobs, education, healthcare, and other vital services. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any additional comments or questions? I had one comment, or excuse me, one question, Councilmember Peterson, and perhaps you're welcome to defer to Central Staff. We did do some work last year that you noted in this document to increase digital navigators. Can you confirm for me how this is different or how this would be additive to what we did last year, and whether or not we have any intel on the Central Staff side about whether those dollars truly went out as we had directed in the wake of COVID?
As I understand it, we were, because of the one-time federal money, we were able to look at the technology matching fund and expand the number of organizations that received funding. I think 55 applicants, but they had only funded 15. So we were able to fund an additional 14, I believe, of those applicants. And we do have an amendment for the technology matching fund. Some of those nonprofits will provide similar types of assistance, but the Digital Navigator program is now a national best practice to provide technical assistance. So it'd really be standing up that program so that we can actually move the needle on Internet for All instead of treading water.
Very helpful. Thank you very much. Lisa, anything to add?
I don't.
Okay, wonderful. I'm not seeing additional hands. Thank you, Councilmember Peterson. Let's move on to item IT 002.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember. Item ITD 2A1 would add $300,000 to the Information Technology Department for the Technology Matching Fund. The Technology Matching Fund was started in 1997 to support community-driven solutions to achieving digital equity and provides competitive grants of up to $25,000 to qualifying organizations. Grant recipients provide a match of cash or of in-kind service. The 2022 proposed budget includes $320,000 for the fund. This is sponsored by Councilmember Peterson and co-sponsored by Council President Gonzalez and Councilmember Juarez.
Very much, Councilmember Peterson.
Thank you. Colleagues, this is the Technology Matching Fund, as you know, is a proven successful program, but traditionally the number of applications far exceed the dollars available. And so to increase access and adoption of internet services, we have to double down on this. In fact, we did last fall, we did earlier this year. However, that's not going to extend into next year unless we do something about it. So if we want to continue to provide the same level in 2022, we need to increase the funding for the Technology Matching Fund so that it's steady. As I mentioned, we had 55 applications earlier this year, and we're able to fund only 15, and we doubled that to 30. So this would basically enable us to make sure we always have approximately 30 going forward that are funded, so that we don't recede or backtrack on this when we're trying to get the last 10% of the city access and even a greater percent to adopt and use the internet in a safe and effective manner.
Thank you, Councilmember Peterson. I'm not seeing additional hands, so I will ask one more question about this. I guess I need a little bit more clarification on how this item and the one we just spoke to are related. Do they go together, or can they be decoupled as they are here? Because the first question that I asked, it sounded like we needed to have this because we had so much of a need, but we can't fulfill that need for the digital navigators without the technology matching fund. Is that correct?
Well, I know we want to do it all, and so this is what we're trying to do with the digital navigator program is stand up that national best practice here to assist those who might have access, but they have not adopted the internet. They might be immigrant families, seniors, low-income residents who have access, could have access, but haven't gotten the service, don't know how to use it. And so this digital navigator program is a trusted group of community members who are able to make that happen. The Technology Matching Fund is a much broader program addressing all sorts of digital divide problems, and so it's left up to those groups to decide how to do it.
I see. Lisa, anything to add to that?
I think Councilmember Peterson mentioned it properly that digital navigators is one type of meeting the digital equity divide, and that in fact some of the matching funds have been for grants that would do that sort of work. But again, there were 55 applications, I think, and 15 of those were filled for the matching funds. And so a lot of those other programs that were not funded because there wasn't enough money would do things other than the digital navigator type program.
Excellent, appreciate it. Okay, Councilmember Peterson, thank you so much. I'm not seeing any additional questions on this one. Let's move on to IDT 003.
Okay, this is ITD 3A1. This is a statement of legislative intent asking for an expenditures report on Internet for All and digital equity in the 2022 adopted budget and all future proposed budgets. This is sponsored by Councilmember Peterson and co-sponsored by Council President Gonzalez and Councilmember Juarez.
Excellent, thank you very much. Councilmember Peterson, please go ahead.
Thank you, and I know colleagues, as we've searched through the budget document, finding programs and efforts that we all care about, the budget document is sometimes not set up to do that very well. And so we were having to, even though we have the Internet for All resolution, we have an action plan, we have 8 strategies to expand access and adoption of affordable, reliable internet service. When you look at the budget, it's either absent or it's scattered in different places. And so for increased transparency and accountability, this slide would request that the city budget office, before they adopt this budget document, that they bring it all together in one place, what they're doing for Internet for All and digital equity, and that when they propose the budget next year, they do the same, so that we can see the year-over-year investments. Obviously, we can have Seattle IT and other departments come to our committees and give annual reports, but with this budget document that states our values, we think it's really important to bring it all together so that we can see out whether we are doing enough fiscally to close the digital divide.
Thank you very much. Additional questions on this? I gotta ask, we haven't done anything like this in the past?
Well, we actually, last year, we had to tell the executive to put Internet for All in the budget so that the public knew that we had passed it and that it was part of the ongoing budget. So I know some of us were surprised when this proposed budget came forward, there wasn't an Internet for All section anymore. So we're simply saying, put it in there again, please, because this is important.
Great, thank you. Allie, anything to add to that? I see a couple one.
No, nothing to add, thank you.
Okay, and Lisa, anything to add?
No, I just wanted to remind you that there was one walk-on ITD
Thank you for
CBA.
that reminder.
This would be Eric McConaughey.
Wonderful. Just one second. Hey, Eric, thanks for being here.
Hi.
So we have walk-on amendment ITD walk-on/1. Please go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, and just for the record, I'm still Eric McConaughey. I'm on the Council of Central Staff. The effect of this amendment, this council budget action, would add $1.3 million of general fund to the Seattle Information Technology Department, ITD, for cybersecurity enhancements. It is sponsored by Councilmember Peterson. And I'd like to take the moment now to note an inadvertent omission that another sponsor of this, a co-sponsor, is Councilmember Strauss. Thank you for your noting of that. The total $1.3 million in general fund would be in 2 pieces, $850,000 for one-time spending in 2022, and $465,000 of ongoing spending beginning in 2022. Of the one-time spending in 2022 general fund, $300,000 would affect one of the programs, one of the CIP projects within ITD. With that, I think I'll pass the mic.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Mosqueda, and thank you, Eric, for that summary. Council members, we know there have been multiple disruptive, invasive, and expensive cyber attacks throughout the United States in 2020 and 2021, reported widely in the news media. And I think we all share the concern and want to make sure that all of our systems are protected. The good news is we have a very strong Seattle Information Technology Department. This walk-on amendment, the reason it had to be walked on was simply because, again, it took us longer than we had hoped to sort of piece together where all the pieces were in the proposed budget, to see that some were already there and that some could benefit from enhancement. So this amendment would enhance cybersecurity for the city of Seattle. And it does it by moving forward in a more rapid fashion with some of the best practices, including multi-factor authentication and helping our vendors with basically helping them with their cybersecurity as well, because there's a lot of financial risk and transactions. We want to make sure that our vendors have what they need. We're also making sure that we are monitoring the types of incidents so that we can actually, what's common for other jurisdictions and large corporations is to hire companies to sort of test the system from the outside to find out whether there are any weaknesses. We don't know of any weaknesses right now. We just want to step up our game because we know that those who are doing the cyber attacks are becoming increasingly sophisticated. So this helps us to accelerate that. And we also have with Seattle City Light, Seattle Public Utilities, we have an extra responsibility to make sure electricity is not interrupted, clean water delivery is not interrupted. And so, we don't want to look back on 2021 and think we could have done something more for cybersecurity. We want to do everything we can, and that's what this amendment is trying to do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, because this was a walk-on amendment, if you haven't had the chance to read it in depth, now is a good time to ask the council member who is prime sponsor or central staff any additional questions you might have. Okay. Thank you, Council Member Peterson, for offering this as an amendment. I know colleagues will be taking a look, and if they have follow-up questions, we'll be getting back in touch with you or Eric McConaughey, as I will as well. Thank you very much. Let's move on to agenda item number 8. Madam Clerk, could you read agenda item number 8, please?
Agenda item 8, Seattle Public Utilities for briefing and discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you. Just doing a quick time check, colleagues. We are going to take a recess in about 43 minutes. So thank you for your work today to get us through these amendments, understand them, have some discussion, and to also be cautious about the time restraints that we have. Madam Clerk, appreciate your work here today. And I'll do a quick reminder for folks as we're getting closer to that 1 o'clock hour. Let's go ahead with Seattle Public Utilities.
Okay, thank you, council members. The first item in Seattle Public Utilities is SPU 1A1. This council budget action would add $175,000 of general fund to Seattle Public Utilities, also known as SPU, to provide additional cleanup services for things like garbage, sharps, and graffiti in the Chinatown International District. The primary sponsor for this item is Councilmember Morales, and it is co-sponsored by Councilmember Lewis and Council President Gonzalez.
Well, Councilmember Morales, anything to add?
Hi, everyone. Sorry. Yes, briefly, the intent here is to provide some more support to the Chinatown International District. That is the area of town with the densest restaurant district actually in the state, the largest amount of low-income business and property owners, as well as the largest concentration of low-income residents in the city. We do have the city's Clear Alley program, which provides, safer alleys and provides for trash pickup. But the way that it's structured right now, it creates an undue financial burden on the businesses and residents in the CID. Businesses and residents are expected to pay a monthly fee for cleanup, for trash pickup, plus $7 to $8 per 30-gallon bag of waste that they're disposing, plus service fees for compost and recycling. When we're talking about the high volume of restaurant service in the neighborhood, the high concentration of low-income business owners and property owners and residents, programs like this really don't offer the kind of incentives that are affordable to folks in that neighborhood. They simply can't afford it. The business improvement area in the neighborhood does provide some support, but again, because of the economic status of the neighborhood, the BIA isn't really able to generate the kind of revenue that they need to keep pace with the support for trash pickup that the neighborhood needs. And so we are requesting or submitting this amendment to provide additional cleanup service. The request was for $350,000 over a 2-year period. And so we're submitting the amendment for half of that amount for the first year.
I want to thank Councilmember Juarez for already indicating that she would like to be added as a co-sponsor. Councilmember Juarez adding her name to SPU 001. Thank you. Any additional comments? Okay. I guess I have a question. This is always risky to ask a question that I should probably know the answer to on live television here. But can you remind me how this pairs with our BIA investments? If there's similar BIAs that are trying to do similar cleanup in other areas of our city, how do we leverage that investment from the BIAs that are taxing themselves, and where does sort of the opportunity come in to try to both bring private investment along with public investment up together at the same time?
Well, I'll take a stab at it, and Brian might be able to provide more information. But as you know, the BIA supplement, it is not intended to be the resource for regular trash pickup. And so for this program, they are able to support some pickup here, but because this, we have the different business improvement areas across the city have widely different revenue and bottom lines, and vary tremendously in how they are able to support their different neighborhood business districts. And it is just the case for the Chinatown International District that though there exists a BIA, their annual revenues are, relatively small compared to the Downtown Seattle Association, for example. And so they do provide some support, but they're just not able to provide the kind of support that's needed in order to keep pace with the trash pickup that is needed in this neighborhood, particularly given, the high amount of food waste and trash that is generated by the restaurants.
Great, thank you for that clarification. Councilmember Sawant, please go ahead.
Just wanted to add it, co-sponsor.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Sawant. Councilmember Sawant adding her name to SPU 001. Appreciate it. Okay, let's move on. The next item in here is SPU 002.
Okay, thank you. Yes, SPU 2A1. So this council budget action would impose a proviso on SPU that restricts $100,000 of SPU's general fund appropriations in the 2022 budget to ensure that Camp Second Chance in West Seattle is provided regular service by one of SPU's mobile hygiene trailers. The primary sponsor for this item is Councilmember Herbold, and it is co-sponsored by Councilmembers Morales and Lewis.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Herbold, please go ahead.
So much. This is the second of 3 budget actions related to Camp Second Chance, as mentioned earlier. And it's connected to the item that we discussed further up in the agenda for a sewer line connection. This funding would reserve resources to ensure that the mobile hygiene trailer that SPU is purchasing, or that access to the mobile hygiene trailer will be available at the site, in recognition that our understanding from SPU that its mobile hygiene trailer will be intended to rotate among locations. This merely ensures that Camp Second Chance is one of those locations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Swan, I believe your hands are carry over. Okay, great. Or did you have something?
I just wanted to add my name as co-sponsor. I spoke about Camp Second Chance previously and won't repeat those points, but would just like to add my name.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Sawant. Councilmember Sawant adding her name to SPU 002. Quick question for central staff. Appreciate the incredible neighborhood support specifically for Camp Second Chance. I think that that's a great example of the type of support we see from neighbors when tiny homes and sanctioned encampments are allowed to be successful and have the supportive services needed. And thank you for the attention on this. With the 21 hygiene stations and 2 hygiene trailers that are intended to be funded in the baseline budget, can you remind us overall, central staff, how many of our sanctioned encampments are going to be able to receive additional support, and where there may still be a gap in services that we are trying to shore up? I think specifically, for Camp Second Chance, we want to make sure that there is the ongoing services at these centers. How many other locations are intended to be served, and are there folks who are going to be left out of the existing baseline investment in the proposed budget?
Thank you, Councilmember Mosqueda. I can try to follow up with more information. I'll tell you what I do know, which is a little bit of what Councilmember Herbold already said. So there are 2 hygiene trailers. One of them is currently is a static location at King Street Station and is intended to continue as a static location either there or on Roy Street. The second trailer that SPU has purchased currently has been serving the University Heights neighborhood 7 days a week. The intent is for it to serve 3 to 4 sites on a rotational basis. So it is a mobile hygiene center. Hygiene trailer. And as Councilmember Herbold said, so this action would request that Camp Second Chance be one of those 3 or 4 sites. I don't have information, about how many total sites there are, so I couldn't tell you how many of the grand total is being served.
Okay, thank you very much, Brian. Look forward to more information about that when you get the chance. Council President, please go ahead.
Just wanted to add my name as a sponsor. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent. Council President Gonzalez. Council President Gonzalez adding her name to SPU 002. Excellent. Let's move on. SPU 003.
Okay, thank you. SPU 3A1. This council budget action would add $1.4 million of general fund to SPU to provide additional wastewater and cleanup services for recreational vehicles, or RVs. The item indicates that SPU would have the ability to direct this funding across 3 RV services: the RV wastewater program, purple bag distribution at RV sites, and additional trash pickup services for RVs, which are known as GeoCleans. The primary sponsor for this item is Councilmember Pursuant, and it is co-sponsored by Councilmembers Morales and Lewis.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Please go ahead, Councilmember Pursuant.
Thank you. This is one of the 2 budget amendments my office has proposed to provide services for people who are forced to live in their vehicles, which means half of the unhoused people in Seattle. And this budget amendment would increase funding for Seattle Public Utilities for garbage collection and sewer pump outs, because the current programs are not nearly sufficient to serve all the RVs and other vehicles that people are now relying on for shelter in Seattle, in the context of not only the recent pandemic and economic crisis, but the ongoing and ever exacerbating housing affordability crisis. This would improve the lives of vehicle residents by providing access to the basic sanitation services that those of us who are housed take for granted, and it also would improve the lives of the housed neighbors of the vehicle residents who want garbage and wastewater cleaned up across their neighborhood. And in fact, in our district, in District 3, and I've spoken to council members and at briefings before, just blocks from where my family lives, we see many of our unhoused neighbors being forced to live in RVs. And we've spoken to the residents of the vehicles and also housed residents, and it's clear that even though there may be disagreements on other aspects of the homelessness crisis, this is something that they are in strong agreement of, that as long as there are people who are being forced to live in their vehicles because of the housing affordability crisis, because of the overall crisis of inequality, we should have these basic services provided to our vehicular residents. And as I mentioned, this is one of the 2 budget amendments regarding services for vehicular residents. The other, which will be discussed tomorrow, establishes 3 safe parking lots if adopted. And these 2 budget amendments would add up to $6 million to support vehicular residents, which is something that has been brought forward by not only the People's Budget campaign for this year, but also the Solidarity Budget and by Real Change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councilmember Sawant, just reiterating a point that you have made and Central Staff has made, half of our unsheltered population in the city lives in vehicles. So I want to make sure folks sit with that information, because that includes kiddos and families as well as individuals. All right. I'm not seeing additional comments or questions. Thank you, Councilmember Sawant, for your work on this. Let's move on to 004, SPU 004.
Thank you. So this is the last item for SPU. As you said, SPU 4A1. This is a statement of legislative intent that would request that SPU, in coordination with the Seattle Department of Transportation, perform an assessment of potential drainage options for Finney Avenue North between North 125th Street and North 130th Street. This item requests that SPU provide a report to the Council's Transportation and Utilities Committee or its successor committee by June 1st of 2022. The primary sponsor for this item is Councilmember Juarez, and it is co-sponsored by Councilmembers Peterson and Strauss.
Thank you. Councilmember Juarez, please go ahead.
Thank you. Speaking as Queen of the North for Districts 4, 5, and 6, let me tell you what this has been. This issue with community members approaching my office has been going on well before I was elected in 2016, concerning the flooding that occurs on the street, resulting in flooding in basements and risky behavior for children walking to Broadview Thompson nearby in Bitter Lake Community Center. This street, like many in District 5 and up north, have no sidewalks, and children frequently walk in the middle of the road to avoid puddles that form on the borders. So we see this a lot up in the north end with lack of sidewalks. So what we're seeing is we want our children, our neighbors, to be able to safely walk in their neighborhood without the fear of getting hit by a car. which, as you know, D5 has the highest pedestrian rate of deaths. So again, this is a perennial safety issue that has been going on forever, that affects obviously disabled folks, elders, and as you would say, Chair, and Madam Chair, kiddos. And so we would like this slide to request that SPU and SDOT come together to create an action plan for moving forward to provide us with options and work with the stakeholders to communicate the results of the assessment. I should say though, and thank you SPU and SDOT, that they have always been great ongoing work outside of the budget cycle process. But I think we're finally gaining some momentum, if you will, some mass here to actually getting more targeted areas that are more high traffic. And as you know, those are around light rail stations, that will be around schools, that will be around community centers, grocery stores. And so that's what we're asking for here. So that's all I got for you. Thank you.
Well, that is great. Thank you very much, Councilmember Juarez. Is there any additional comments or questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any. I believe that concludes the SPU section. Did I hear that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, thumbs up. Okay, thank you very much to our team. Let's move on to the last item in this category, that is utilities, Seattle City Light. Please go ahead, Eric.
Hi, this is Eric McConaughey, Council Central Staff. This next item is City Light 1A1.
Oh, excuse me, I need to ask, I missed a step, that's my mistake. Madam Clerk, could you please read item number 9 into the record?
Oh, I apologize.
Agenda item 9, Seattle City Light for briefing and discussion.
Excellent, thank you, Council. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Please go ahead, Eric.
Thank you. This is a CL 1A1, and this council budget action would add $160,000 of general fund to Seattle City Light to support the installation of streetlights along Northwest 48th Street between 8th Avenue Northwest and 6th Avenue Northwest, and along the alleys north and south of Northwest 48th Street. The source for this ad is general fund because street lighting is a general government function that can't be funded with revenues from city light ratepayers. Also, please note that the city, in an ongoing way, would pay for the costs of the electric power and maintenance of any new streetlights constructed under this proposal. This is sponsored by Councilmember Strauss, and with co-sponsors Morales and Councilmember Morales and Councilmember Lewis.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Strauss, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Mosqueda and colleagues. This request comes from my regularly scheduled district office hours, where we had a request for increased lighting for safety measures in the alleyways. This led to us doing a walking tour of the entire neighborhood to assess what areas would need additional lighting. And through this process, I walked with Mike Haynes and Stephen Crum of Seattle City Light and Amanda from my office in the dark. I took them up unimproved alleyways, up hills, through the dark. I just want to thank everyone for going on that walk with me. What we found is, and colleagues, I try to refrain from the long old history of Ballard being its own city and how Fremont was developed. What we have here is two different plats that were developed, and a street does not have any streetlights in the Fremont area. And so what, as Eric noted for the record, is that we can't use ratepayer funds to put streetlights on the street. It's a very long block. It has a good tree canopy, and so there's very little light. When we did our walking tour as city employees, we had to use our flashlights just to navigate the street. And so that is why I'm bringing this amendment here, because we need to have the general fund dollars pay for this improvement so that ratepayer dollars, I guess I won't jump to ratepayer dollars, but that we will also then be spending our general fund dollars on the electrical activation of these lights. We have the neighbors have coalesced around this and have done extensive outreach to everyone on the block, and there is wide consensus that this is a desired improvement that they would like to see. So thank you to the neighbors of 48th Street, and thank you, colleagues, for considering this request.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Strauss. Any additional comments or questions? Councilmember Peterson, I just want to make sure I'm reading your face correctly. If you have questions, feel free to jump in. I think that this is actually very helpful for if folks do have questions. This is the time to do it. And as the council president noted in some of her comments earlier today, questions are not intended to be debating in nature. I think what we're trying to do is really suss out the issue and have a better understanding of if there's similar efforts that are going on within your committees and you have other ideas that you want to share that may correlate. Please feel free to do that, as well as questions are helpful for this deliberative process. So don't be shy. And Councilmember Strauss, please go ahead again.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to add some additional context. This is a residential area in an industrial zone, and so there are added public safety issues because of being adjacent to an industrial zone. And I just also want to thank City Light for doing what they could for the quick wins. There were a number of streetlights out on 8th Avenue. There were a number of places that City Light could add streetlights themselves, but this request to bring streetlights to a street that does not have them and requires a flashlight to navigate in the dark needs our support here today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Strauss. Okay, let's go ahead and move on then. I believe that concludes our City Light section. And if there's no other walk-on amendments for this subcategory, we will move on to subcategory 3, arts, education, and culture. Madam Clerk, could you please read item number 10 into the record?
Agenda item 10, Seattle Public Library for briefing and discussion.
Thank you very much. Please go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. SBA 1A1 would add $99,000 to the Seattle Public Library to purchase additional hotspot devices for checkout by library patrons and or to maintain existing hotspot devices. Just some background, the hotspots provide users a wireless connection to the internet for up to 15 devices. In 2020, the library's 675 devices were checked out nearly 8,000 times. The library also provides 325 hotspots to community partners. This council budget action is sponsored by Councilmember Peterson and co-sponsored by Council President Gonzalez and Councilmember Juarez.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Councilmember Peterson.
Thank you, Chair Mosqueda. This harkens back to the Internet for All additions that we have, where we talked about the digital navigators, the technology matching fund, and improving the transparency and accountability in the budget. This is the addition of the hotspots that are one of the most efficient ways to increase instant access to high quality internet. So I think central staff summed it up very well.
Any additional comments or questions on this? Thank you so much. We do know that this has been a need that has been expressed before. I know Councilmember Juarez, when she was chairing the library levy discussions, we had heard a tremendous need from folks who are living in vehicles and shelters about the way that these hotspots provide connection to jobs, healthcare, and other services. So thank you for raising this again. So let's go on to 002, Seattle Public Library.
Thank you. This is the second and last of the Public Library Council budget actions. SPL 2-A-1 would add $1.7 million to one-time money to the public libraries to provide air conditioning as a climate adaptation measure in the Northeast and Southwest branch libraries. The CBA would also impose a proviso, so the funding could not be used for any other purpose. This is sponsored by Councilmember Peterson and co-sponsored by Councilmembers Herbold and Savant.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Peterson.
Thank you, Chair Mosqueda. Colleagues, as part of our adapting to the reality and the crisis of climate change, we have to have these cooling centers throughout the city. During the heat waves this past summer, there were a few libraries that had to be shut down because they did not have air conditioning, so they could not be libraries and they could also not be cooling centers. And so there is a plan, a capital improvement plan to seismically upgrade several of the older libraries. And when they do that, air conditioning will be installed. However, there are two libraries that are newer and are not part of that plan. And one is in the Southwest and one is in the Northeast. And so this would this would provide the funding to do that climate adaptation work, to create those cooling centers so that there's not the geographic gap which existed this past summer.
Councilmember Herbold.
Thank you. I just want to thank Councilmember Peterson for bringing this forward and point to the fact during the summer's heat wave, Southwest District 1 was not very well served, not just because of the absence of a cooling system at this library, but because of our isolation associated with both our geographic distance from the location of many cooling centers through the city, but also because of the bridge being down. Even when the bridge is up and functioning, it's a challenge for District 1 folks on the peninsula to access emergency shelter, whether or not you're talking about winter response in the wintertime or cooling centers in heat waves. So really appreciate the attention to this need.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Councilmember Herbold. Any additional comments? Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on. I'm looking at agenda item number 11. Madam Clerk, can you read it into the record for us?
Agenda item 11, Department of Education and Early Learning for briefing and discussion.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, we have about 15 minutes left, 18 minutes left. Let's see how much we can get through. I'd love to finish DEEL and get on to one more section if we can. Please go ahead, Central Staff.
Thank you very much. So the first item for the Department of Education and Early Learning, or DEEL as it's known, is DEEL 1A1. This council budget action would add $1 million of one-time general fund to DEEL for culturally responsive and identity-affirming programming for Black girls and young women and Black queer and transgender youth. This item would continue funding a body of work that was initially funded in last year's budget with one-time funds. The primary sponsor for this item is Councilmember Morales, and it is co-sponsored by Councilmembers Herbold and Lewis.
Thank you very much. Please go ahead. Councilmember Morales, hi. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, I do have several amendments that address the lack of access to opportunity that many of our young people face. As you know, one of my priorities is to address the racial wealth gap, and that really begins with the kind of exposure that many Black and Brown young people get to things like mentoring and tutoring and leadership opportunities. So as Brian mentioned before, we did fund DEEL last year to develop strategies for increasing their investment in Black girls and queer and transgender youth. The study they conducted was presented to council in June and really highlighted that Black girls and trans youth are made invisible by many of our systems. So this proposal seeks to fund additional organizations that are doing the work to provide safe space for young people and to ensure that they are seen and heard and affirmed, and would increase access to this programming for the 2022-2023 school year.
Thank you very much. Any additional questions or comments? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much, Councilmember Morales. Let's move on to item number 002.
Okay, thank you. DEEL 2A1 is the next item. And this council budget action would add $2 million of general fund to DEEL for culturally responsive after-school programming for middle and high school students, with a priority for programs that support immigrant and refugee youth and provide in-language support. The primary sponsor for this item is Councilmember Morales, and it is co-sponsored by Councilmembers Herbold and Mosqueda.
Let's go ahead, Councilmember Morales.
Thank you. I don't have much to add, thank you, except that this does address, as I was saying, the need for providing support, continued support, especially for after-school programming. I think we heard from lots of folks calling in from El Centro de la Raza who are talking about the need to be able to provide after-school mentorship, tutoring programs, and family support in language. And so this amendment seeks to provide that support.
Thank you very much. And Council President Gonzalez, please go ahead.
I just want to have my name added as a co-sponsor to this item. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Council President Gonzalez. Council President Gonzalez is adding her name to DEEL 002. I also want to thank Councilmember Morales and having had the chance to see Estela Ortega on Friday last week and hearing more about the impact of this potential reduction. Really appreciate the opportunity to co-sponsor this as well. We know that these services are not only providing essential care for our community, and specifically our Latinx community, but also making it possible for people to be able to go to work and not worry about the safety of their kiddos. And especially in this time, we want to preserve these programs, not reduce them. So thank you for bringing this forward. Happy to be a co-sponsor on this. Okay, let's move on. Item number 003.
Thank you. DEEL 3A1. This council budget action would add $50,000 of one-time general fund to DEEL to cover the non-labor operating costs for opening toddler childcare classrooms, primarily serving parents attending college faculty, and the surrounding community. The primary sponsor for this item is Councilmember Juarez, and it is co-sponsored by Councilmember Morales and Council President Gonzalez.
Thank you very much. Please go ahead, Councilmember Juarez.
Thank you. So as you know, due to the challenges of COVID-19 and a transition to virtual learning, North Seattle College closed their child care center in March of 2020. We've been working closely with Dr. Crawford, the president of North Seattle College, to get a pre-K and childcare, to get their pre-K and childcare program back online. So this funding aims to assist the college to reopen its childcare facility. This budget action would support the operating costs for 2 classrooms, providing 28 children high quality care and allowing their parents, students and employees of North Seattle College to continue to pursue higher education or teach as faculty members. We have learned that 69% of families supported by this child care facility, which has been in existence for quite a while, are BIPOC, and 51% speak English as a second language, and it has gotten even more diverse as the college has grown. Childcare, as you all understand, I'm sure, and agree with, should not be a barrier to education, or certainly not to employment. Since the opening of the John Lewis Memorial Bridge and Northgate Link Light Rail, this is one of the most accessible childcare facilities in the city. If you recall the John Lewis Bridge, it lands almost right next to the childcare facility, and that was by design. Originally, the bridge was supposed to be at the south end of the campus, but we felt that the north end was better, would provide more access where people could drop their children off at the childcare, those that either go to school or work there, or use the childcare to come over across the bridge to be employed at the Northgate Plaza or the Northgate area. So anyway, we would love to see the school back up and running as soon as possible. And I think I've shared this with you before. We are, I think the approximation for those boarding at Northgate Light Rail is about 15,000. And we're still counting. So hopefully this is what our very first step that we started talking about 4 or 5 years ago. Besides transit-oriented development or transit-oriented housing, we indeed have transit-oriented childcare. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Juarez. We just quickly want to thank you as well for the work that you've done over the years on the John Lewis Memorial Bridge. I've only had the chance to vote on that bridge 4 times, but I know that you've worked on helping to get funding secured for that bridge throughout 4 mayors. So thank you for the work there. And, you know, you have taken it from what sounded like it was a dark tunnel that was not accessible. And because of the work that you and council did to expand the vision there, really actually made it an accessible, walkable, and beautiful bridge dedicated to John Lewis. So I just wanted to highlight that history and thank you for your work there.
Well, I want to share, if you don't mind, Madam Chair, just briefly, this is the work of this council and the council before, and like you said, 4 mayors, including yourself, Council President Gonzalez, have always been supportive of this bridge and widening it and making it more accessible for strollers and moms in wheelchairs and students. And so, you know, as you all know, I can't take credit, but a little, but it's mainly been the legislative body and the goodwill of the last 4 mayors that had made clear that the city of Seattle would contribute through SDOT more money to make it a better bridge, a prettier bridge, a safer bridge, a more accessible bridge. So my thanks and my hands up to my colleagues and to the last 4 mayors. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Appreciate your leadership on that. We did it. So good to take a moment to recognize that hard work that went in over multiple years. Let's continue on. DEEL 004. Thank you, Councilmember Juarez.
Okay, thank you. So the next item, yes, is DEEL 4A1. This council budget action would add $500,000 of one-time general fund to DEEL to assist Seattle Public Schools with improving bus routing technology, including the purchase of software and devices for each of the buses. The primary sponsor for this item is Councilmember Peterson, and it is co-sponsored by Councilmember Morales and Council President Gonzalez.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Peterson, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Mosqueda. Colleagues, this is a request from our School Traffic Safety Committee, which is comprised of school district staff, SDOT staff, and community leaders concerned with pedestrian safety. It's also a request from several school board members, and it will be welcomed by Seattle Public Schools. This amendment provides a one-time capital investment to enable Seattle Public Schools to address the school bus crisis by using technology to help bus drivers, parents, and the school district. The technology includes routing transportation software and GPS tablets on each bus, but that would be owned by the school district. This would make it much easier for bus drivers to staff and understand the revised routes that they have to get kids to where they need to go on time. Currently, directions are printed on paper, and drivers on new routes have difficulties staying on time, causing a cascade of late buses throughout the city, and then parents are left wondering when their children will arrive. These parents and students are our constituents too, and this is a way that we can provide one-time funding to help Seattle Public Schools with an immediate need. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Peterson. So I want to thank you and the members of the school board for the work you've done to identify this issue. Last year, I know we continue to receive concerns and calls from school board members who are very concerned about the city's role in helping to provide cleanup, for example, and housing services for those who were unsheltered and on or near school property. And that very much felt like it was the city's responsibility to be a better partner there. And again, I think it's lamentable that we weren't a better partner in helping our school board members at that time. On this question, I'm just wondering what the role of the school board is and or the role of OSPI and the state legislature to help provide the technology needed for these school buses. It sounds like this is something different than using regular GPS tracking, perhaps on the smart device. So can you tell me a little bit more about the role that the school board or the state legislature might have on this type of request?
Well, the school district, we're reading about this crisis right now in the paper, and I think that the school board's budgetary options and ability to raise funding is very limited. And whereas we're in the middle of our budget process now, we have multiple sources of funds. There are multiple requests. I mean, we have the Department of Education and Early Learning, of course, to help support schools, public schools. So this is just a one-time capital funding that we've been asked about to support. Again, the school district would own this equipment. So, but the problem right now is bus drivers are printing it out on paper, and it's what's contributing to the crisis.
Thank you very much. I see Councilmember Morales, then Councilmember Strauss, then Council President Gonzalez. Councilmember Morales, please go ahead.
That was a mistake. My apologies.
No problem. Thank you very much. Councilmember Strauss, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. It just so happened I met with some of these folks yesterday during my District 6 office hours. We've got a number of District 6 residents on the School Safety Commission here. So just looking at my notes, I want to highlight a couple things that I heard yesterday, which is that, as we know, the state legislature provides a bucket of general funding for transportation. That does not necessarily include McKinney-Vento requirements for transporting students who are experiencing homelessness or home instability to and from their schools. As we know, if a student is enrolled at a school and moves to Linwood because of housing instability, the school district is still responsible for getting that student from Linwood to their Seattle public school. Granted, this is, and I told the group yesterday, this is squarely, within the purview, the state legislature needs to fund this. And as we know from the, and luckily I'm blanking on the name of the lawsuit at this point because we've gotten far enough away from it, but we do know that the state is not funding the school district at the rate that it should be. When I pushed back on the conversation last night, I suggested that as the school district is restarting contract negotiations and RFPs for future carriers, that this is included, this proposal is included in that contract so that as technology changes, we don't need to come back to this conversation. And it does seem that this is a need that is needed today, because again, you can't just take a phone and plug in the GPS route for the bus route on your phone because of the length and difficulty of navigating school buses through residential streets. So the case was made to me even after I pushed back yesterday, and I support this as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Strauss. Councilmember Gonzalez, Council President Gonzalez.
Thank you. Just wanted to add a little context here and perhaps some nuance. I am listed as a co-sponsor of this item. I do continue to support it. I will say that I see this as a stopgap measure to the realities around the ongoing transportation difficulties related to how SPS meets the needs of transportation for those children in Seattle Public Schools who continue to rely on the busing system to get to and from school and class every single day. I want to flag that in my conversations with Councilmember Peterson, when we talked about this particular item, I was very transparent in my concerns that I think that the way that SPS is continuing to manage transportation needs of students is unsustainable, and that the city of Seattle should not be continuously put in the position of being the backfill or the safety net for addressing many of those systemic concerns. Now, that being said, again, getting back to the need to address the realities of our constituents' ability to get to and from school. They don't get to vote, but they're still our constituents, is really important. And so I do think that while we continue to work with our partners on the school board, while we continue to work with the administration over at the Seattle Public Schools on those long-term issues related to transportation in the school system, I do think it's important to provide this technology as a way to create some greater efficiency within the bus system that will hopefully yield some positive results in being able to, in the context of having less bus drivers, to really sort of get more kids to and from schools. And I know that all of us hear from parents within the public schools system talking about how buses sometimes just don't show up. Sometimes they're an hour to 2 hours late. And so I think that this technology investment could help create some efficiencies, again, while we as a good partner work with Seattle Public Schools on addressing the longer term structural issues that frankly have continued to worsen year after year after year. And so I think it behooves us to build strong partnership there and to work towards a long-term solution. So I just wanted to offer that up as the chair and other council members think about this particular potential investment.
Great, thank you very much, Council President. I think that was a good example of sort of the dialogue, the questions, the back and forth that we'd love to hear on some of these amendments as we go forth. We will take one more item here to close out DEEL, and then we will go to our recess, colleagues. Thank you for the discussion. DEEL 005.
Thank you. So the last item, yes, for DEEL is 5A1. This council budget action would add $450,000 of general fund to DEEL to supplement funding for a restorative justice pilot program in Seattle schools. This item would continue funding a body of work that was initially funded in last year's budget and that has $550,000 of funding included in the 2022 proposed budget. The primary sponsor for this item is Councilmember Morales, and it is co-sponsored by Councilmembers Strauss and Lewis.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Morales.
Thank you. Well, as Brian said, we did fund this last year at $550,000 for a restorative justice pilot that is a partnership with Seattle Public Schools and with community-based organizations to really try to build out restorative practices in the infrastructure of schools to move away from punitive practices. This year I am hoping to expand the program with an allocation that would allow us to increase the number of schools and the number of organizations who can participate in the pilot, so that as a city we can learn from a few different environments and learn as much as possible about how to fund and how to implement these kinds of changes citywide.
Thank you, Councilmember Morales. Any additional questions? Councilmember Morales, is this bringing to scale some of the existing services if we're already providing $550,000 from support from last year, or is it?
It would. So this pilot allows, I think, to work with 2 schools, and the hope is that we would be able to start working with additional schools. As I mentioned when we talked about this last year, there is a lot of like practices in place in some schools, but what this really is getting at is how we change culture within the administration, within the staff. So it isn't just about teaching the kids peacemaking circles. It's about addressing some of the culture, particularly when we're talking about punitive discipline, that exists within the administration of the schools. And so the hope is that we can expand that work into more than just 1 or 2 high schools in the area.
Thank you for the clarification. I'm not seeing any additional questions on this. Thank you for bringing this forward. And Brian, thanks for everything on DEEL. I think we're at the end of our DEEL presentation. We have arts next, and we do have 1 walk-on amendment there. So I'm going to go ahead and call us into recess. We will come back again at 2 p.m. When we come back, we will start with arts and finish out the rest of this section here, and before we move on to planning and community workforce development. With that, if there's no objection, the committee will be in recess until 2 p.m. Okay, great. Thanks. There's no objection. We'll see you at 2 p.m. Thanks all.
Thanks.